Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Broccoli Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had Water-Breathing Quirk? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Aizawa Shota was just looking through his going-to-be students' files when he counted them. And counted them again. There were only 19. He was missing one Midoriya Izuku. He quickly ran to the rat's office, not even noticing the door was open before running inside. Where is Midoriya Izuku's file? His eyes were red, having previously discovered his quirk didn't affect Nizu. It's right here, would you like to read it here? Nizu held the file in his paw, offering it towards Aizawa, who turned off his quirk when he noticed it. I found it quite interesting and read it a few times. The dark-haired man took the file, flipping through it. What about it piqued your interest? Nizu glanced at the man before answering his question. Midoriya Izuku was a perfectly average student at Aldera until leaving during his second and third years to temporarily move to an area in northern Japan. He had a consistent average of 85 and almost always scored the same on his tests. He slid off his chair to make some tea. Shota stared at him before checking his scores for himself. It was a row of 85s dotted with 84s and 80 SIXS. And that's totally not suspicious. Why would he leave, and for a matter why did he doctor his average? I don't actually know. The teacher nearly dropped the file, staring wide-eyed at the chimera. His mother is in Mustafu and he's returned to her for the school year. He went to the same elementary school and attended Aldera with Bakugo Katsuki. Perhaps you could ask him. When he mentioned the blonde student's name, his eyes glinted with something Aizawa didn't want to poke at today. Is there anything interesting about him, Midoriya? Yes, he had one overdue book from the library that was recently returned. Breathing, The Art of the Demon Slayers is an old book from before the dawn of quirks, before even the quote-unquote modern age. Breathing styles are apparently ancient swordsmanship forms practiced by the mysterious Demon Slayer Corps, which were less than an urban legend. I doubt how much of the book is actually true. The two of them obviously wanted to read it, Nizu smirking just a touch saying the name, Aizawa furrowing his brows when his boss explained breathing styles. So? Kids go through the equality era fan phase. Maybe Midoriya was into something before that. Middle school students were often the reason history teachers like Cementos couldn't find enough materials for the unit centering around the 21st century. Nizu let a pause sneak its way into the conversation, sipping his tea. I suppose. I will keep an eye on him and I hope you do too. Aizawa nodded the moment he asked, no doubt in his mind that Midoriya would be a problem child. Shota let another lull in the conversation let his boss sip more tea, flipping through some of the pages. What's his quirk? He doesn't have one. Shota in a sharp breath, glancing up as if to make sure it was true. Well, in that case he might have left because of that. Being quirkless is much more common up north and he would be able to have a much more fair education that way. That is true, but then wouldn't it be listed as a school and not private tutoring? I don't understand why he would leave for his second year, not his first. Only then was there a longer pause while Nizu did some paperwork and Aizawa thought. Wait, how did he get in? The tall man broke the silence, Nizu setting his pen down. He's got green curly hair and doesn't have a quirk to use, I would remember him. Nizu went somber, or as somber as he could while being a small mouse-looking creature. An old friend of mine passed away after only asking me to teach Midoriya. I think it's best for him to be in a class of students before starting anything with me. Aizawa immediately felt bad for asking, opening his mouth to apologize when the principal started shaking his head. I don't even know how they knew each other. He looked at a picture on the window of Nizu standing on the shoulder of an older man, whose mask was obscured by a Tengu mask. He wrote to me only asking to take care of Midoriya and to be patient with him. Nizu picked up the pen again and Aizawa left, giving the chimera space. His mother's, "Bye sweetie," was the last thing he heard before closing the door of their small abode. Midoriya felt terrible for leaving his mother so soon. She worked the evening shifts and wouldn't be home when he got back, and he just came back from the trip up north. He decided he felt odd, wearing normal clothes and not the haori and robe he was so accustomed to. Dress pants were difficult to keep nice, and they were itchy. He would prefer his black ones over this any day. He made a point to not get distracted, wanting to get to the UA, early enough to figure out where his class is. He also decided he wasn't used to the streets and turns. Yes, he had grown up here, but like his mother pointed out, he changed a lot since he was last here. His hands were tougher, his training having made them rougher. He was also stronger, muscle hiding underneath his new uniform. You couldn't really tell that much, he just wasn't a twig anymore. Anyone could have achieved the same appearance through a summer of working out. He also had an undercut, the longer part slightly sticking up from having worn a mask for hours on end previously. He didn't have the hopeless bush of hair his mother used to argue with. It was also slightly straighter, something his mother was thankful for. He had also worn the Hanafuda earrings almost religiously after his father passed away, but since coming back he decided to not bring them to UA, just in case they got broken. Without them he felt different. This feels weird because there's more by my neck weird. Something it's missing weird. He was taller, something his mother didn't believe was possible. He wasn't the little 5 feet 4 inches boy everyone used to bully for being quirkless, but a 5 feet 6 inches boy, still growing too, who couldn't shake the air of superiority he managed to get over the 2 years. 2 inches wasn't much, but enough Mitsuki and Masaru were surprised when they swung by to see him. Katsuki had been too busy with his acceptance into UA to care whether or not he came back. In fact, Izuku was pretty sure he didn't know about his return. Making sure he went on the right train, he held onto the pole while scrolling through the news to see what he had missed, a habit he had since coming back and finding out the water hose duo didn't survive an attack. All Might was being more active in the area, but had also been gradually letting the newer generation of heroes take care of more situations. He could be planning to retire soon, but the man was too determined to stay active for as long as he could to go down willingly. The UA teachers were also slowing down with their support in the fight against crime, getting ready for school to start. Looking at the school's website, there weren't any new teachers, so the heroics teachers were Vlad King and an unnamed pro hero, for whom this year would mark 7 years of teaching. No mention of anything worse than typical criminals, nothing he would have to take care of. To be honest, he didn't really know how he got into UA without doing the entrance exam. After Urokadaki-sensei passed away, he was delivered a letter of acceptance from the principal and soon a package with the uniform. Getting off the train, he started his way towards the school. He is doing this. He is going to UA, his lifelong dream, and was on his path to whatever he ended up doing. He wasn't going to be a hero. He gave up after realizing most of the adults around him never really supported him, so he decided on a new path. Whatever this new path was. After he managed to find the classroom, he was surprised to find a huge door. He quietly opened it, revealing a tall, built-like-a-wall boy with blue hair and glasses yelling at Katsuki? He supposed some things were bound to change in 2 years, but this was more than he was expecting. He glanced at the board to see he was sitting behind the explosive boy. Already he knew this would be a long 3 years, and it was barely the first day of school. As more people filtered in, a kid with a tail, a tall girl with a ponytail, a short boy following the girl, who he tripped, gaining a thankful look from the girl, a girl with bouncy brown hair, so many different people. There was a kid with a bird head for crying out loud. The classroom gradually got louder, the blank noise of chatter reminding him of Aldera. Everyone was sitting in their seats, introducing themselves to the people around them. No one noticed the door opening again. He watched the yellow sleeping bag crawl in the room, glancing to see if anyone else saw it. Everyone was busy talking. He held a staring contest with the man inside, and after they both blinked he spoke up. Guys. He spoke loudly, just enough to get their attention. Is that our teacher? He pointed to the sleeping bag. The class of 19 other students looked to him, to his hand, to the sleeping bag. Midoriya could feel the stare of a familiar blonde. 14 seconds. It took you 14 seconds to quiet down, and that's after Midoriya had watched me for nearly a minute. When Shota opened the door, he expected no one to notice. He's spent years perfecting this entrance and no one has noticed him before, at least the first day. Once he looks in the room, he immediately makes eye contact with a boy, Midoriya of all people. He continued to shuffle into the room, just behind the podium, still keeping contact with the problem child. They both blinked at roughly the same time, so the kid finally spoke up about him. Guys. Multiple things happened at once and Shota can remember them all as if they happened yesterday. Yaoyorozu finally noticed him. Most of the class turned to Midoriya or quieted their conversations. Bakugo whipped his head to stare at Midoriya with so much hatred and surprise in his eyes. Eraserhead, the Eraserhead who never slept and would expel most of his students he ever had, felt a shiver go down his spine. Is that our teacher? If the class didn't see him before, they definitely did now. Everyone sat upright in their seats, waiting for him to start talking. Hello. I'm Aizawa Shota, your homeroom teacher. Take one of the training uniforms and go out to the field. You have 6 minutes or you're expelled. There was a moment of silence, a pause where you could drop a needle and it would have echoed. Then he turned and left, resulting in screaming coming from the other side. He smirked, basking in the glory of the students realizing he wasn't lying. He quickly got to the field, 5 minutes early, just enough time to think about the Midoriya kid. If Nizu was keeping an eye on him, then he would know the kid noticed him right away. He would also know that no one really talked to him. He wasn't worried about that though. He could make people talk to him, and with how social everyone else is, they would eventually talk to him. He was, however, worried about Bakugo. Bakugo hadn't noticed Midoriya before he spoke up, and was subsequently said. And not just said. This was a problem. 5 minutes later the purple kid came, late. He didn't notice he was late, having casually walked through the doorway. Mineta Minoru. You're late. It too, as then the beautiful look of awareness flashed onto the kid's face, slowly looking up at him. Aizawa looked sternly down at him. I'm sorry? No, you're expelled. Shooing the kid away, he turned to the rest of the class. We are doing a quirk apprehension test. Bakugo, how far was your ball throw in middle school? 76 meters. Aizawa tossed the ball to him. You can do anything as long as you stay in the circle. Bakugo walked, but is that a walk? To the circle and through it. No one could really tell which was louder, Bakugo or his explosion. Turned to the rest of the class, showing the score of 705.2 meters. Whew! This is gonna be so much fun. A pink girl shouted, waving her arms around, causing the surrounding people to back away but still sharing her enthusiasm. He smirked, the kids evidently not learning anything since the threat of expulsion. Fun? This isn't fun. This is testing your upper boundaries. Whoever comes in last will be expelled. All the kids quieted, wide-eyed at him, except Bakugo, Tokoyami, Yaoyorozu and Midoriya. Shota doubted he could surprise Bakugo. He couldn't fathom the expression on the kid's face. Tokoyami and Yaoyorozu, sure, maybe he didn't startle them like he did most everyone else. But Midoriya? He was a perfect kid, totally calm and respectful, wired. Good. Let's start. The first test was the 50-meter dash. Ida Tenya has engines in his legs, of course he's fast. Ojiro Mashireo was surprising fast, along with Bakugo. Midoriya was the interesting one. He was much more of a long-distance runner, you could tell because at 13 meters he put on a burst of speed. He was in the top half of the class already, and that was just running. Next up was the grip strength test. Shoji Mizo got 540 kilograms, which was by far the most impressive score, but some of the girls managed to score better than the boys, all of them doing better than Denki Kaminari and Aoyama Yuga. Midoriya, who has taken the position of problem child number 1, did almost as well as Bakugo, who already had an impressive score, despite not being as high as Shoji's. After that was the repeated side steps, only Tsuyu doing anything noteworthy. Yaoyorozu struggled but soon got the hang of it. Bakugo used his explosions until he fell. Midoriya did well for about a minute or two before slowing down and joining the group. The ball throw was the most exciting by far. Uraraka Achoko got infinity by negating the gravity on it. Ida didn't do as well as he could have, but Tsuyu Azui did really well. Tokoyami could have done better, but he did do about as well as Shoji. The last person to do the ball throw was problem child #. He walked up to Aizawa but paused before taking the ball. His brows furrowed. I can do anything without leaving the circle? Whatever you want to. With that the kid took the ball, walked to the circle, and turned around. He looked at each of the students, though not even looking at Bakugo, who just earned the position of problem child number 2, before facing Uraraka. Can you use your quirk on this? That caused an outrage, everyone complaining about how he can't do that. Problem child number 2 was among the 3 that were quiet, something problem child number 1 noticed, glancing at the blonde before turning back to the girl. She stood still for a second before slowly nodding, obviously not sure if she was allowed to. Yeah. He tossed it to her, and once she caught it she carefully threw it back, making sure he got it back. Once he did, he just chucked it forward, scoring infinity like the girl herself. The only difference was that his throw was slightly faster. And just like that, the ball throw was over. Aizawa sighed. He just wanted the test to be over. He had a lot to talk to Nizu about and he wasn't looking forward to it. The next test was a long-distance run. It was a test of the endurance the students have, and while it should have technically been the last, well, the students didn't have to know that Aizawa was making it hard for them. It was taken in turns of 4 people at a time so the track wouldn't be bunched up with people in the beginning. Unsurprisingly, Yaoyorozu made roller skates and Ida just ran, both of them getting high scores already. Sato did well too, along with Koda, which surprised everyone considering Sato hadn't had any sugar like he did with the grip test and Koda hadn't even said anything. However, the most impressive scorer was Midoriya. He had been doing well already, but this was obnoxious. He ran the track 4 more times than Yaoyorozu and Ida did each, 14, she was tired of skating and Ida was having engine issues. No one had noticed that he was doing so well because he was one of the first people to start and hadn't been going that fast. Actually, he was barely jogging. He only stopped once he was the last to stay on the track. The standing long jump. Aizawa himself always despised having to do this one. He hadn't been that muscular when he was a first and second year and would usually do poorly. Bakugo and Aoyama were among the few that actually cleared the sandbox, the only others being Yaoyorozu after making a pogo stick, Tsu after a few small warm-up jumps, and Midoriya. Of course Midoriya cleared it. Midoriya Izuku, problem child number 1, the green-haired student Nizu was watching. The kid Aizawa so desperately wanted to see do the endurance run again, cleared the sandbox. The quirkless kid cleared the sandbox. Don't get Aizawa wrong, he's always respected quirkless people who put their status behind them, but Midoriya was different. He's a good kid, but he was used to doctoring his test results and was surely doing it now. He flipped over it too. The whole 6-meter sandbox. And no one saw it. Everyone else was sitting on the benches by the water, totally ignoring whoever was testing. To give them privacy, they said when Yaoyorozu asked for it when she made the pogo stick. What the heck, problem child? Once that was done, it was the seated toe touch, the student being separated into 3 basic groups: flexible, can touch their toes but that's it, and can't touch their toes. Mina, Midoriya, Todoroki, Shiro and Hagakure made up the flexible group, Bakugo just barely not managing to reach further than his toe. Aizawa was merciful in giving them sit-ups last. It was the last thing they had to do before leaving early for the day. He wasn't a monster as much as they complained, getting shut up with a knife-sharp glare. He wanted to talk with Nizu as quickly as possible and then take a nap. Of course, with Midoriya's scores so far that chat won't be as short as he hoped it would be. Deadpan, looking across the sea of sweating teenagers in the heat, he praised them. Congratulations, you've made it to the last test. Mina and Kaminari were the first to react, Mina yelling, "What? Finally, I'm dying in this sun." With Kaminari joining in with an excited, "Yes." Sato joined them, "I can't wait to go home and take a shower." The class shut up with another sharp glare. "But since there are 19 of you, someone gets to do them with me." The previous glare didn't shut them up evidently, Shoji's soul having quietly left his body as he paled like everyone else around him. "Midoriya, you'll be with me, everyone else partner up." He didn't just pick Midoriya to have a chance to talk to him alone, or because Nizu was watching. Midoriya was the only one who didn't pale at the idea that the super mean strict teacher, Mina's words, not his, would be partnering with someone, presumably to tell them how poorly they were doing. Once everyone was partnered up, people started their sit-ups. Aizawa rested his legs on Midoriya's feet to weigh them down, and soon Midoriya set a comfortable pace for the test. "Midoriya." The kid looked up to him, continuing with the pace. "I want you to retake this tomorrow after school." Midoriya faltered in his pattern but soon corrected himself. You are a long-distance runner, but we're pretty slow in the endurance run. Problem child number 1 stepped abruptly, looked him dead in the eyes and continued the exercise. I guess I haven't been going very plus ultra like you expected. Shota didn't want to have to walk all the way to the office he was expected at. His boss, a genius chimera who had a timetable, was expecting him about now, but he really didn't want to have to talk to him about the problem child who was proving to be an enigma. Sighing, he put the folders of each of the results to the side and stood up, heading to the door. Problem child number 1 had gotten 3rd place, causing problem child number 2 to increase the divine hatred, Tchx random ass raven, in his eyes all the way. If it hadn't been for Shota silently warning him, he probably would have attacked the kid. Somehow Shota made it to the door of the office whilst deep in thought. It was already open, the sweet smell of tea wafting towards him. Ah, Aizawa, would you like any? I just made some. Nizu called from the mini-kitchen in the corner of his office. The taller man shook his head. No, I'll have coffee after. Sitting down, Nizu started the conversation. Midoriya is quite the student. Aizawa nodded, not really being able to add anything to the statement. Nizu continued. He doctored his own test results, and even when he didn't do his hardest, he still managed 3rd place and managed to anger Bakugo even more. The last statement made Shota think, do you know why Bakugo hates him so much? Actually, I might have figured out why, or at least one of the contributors to it. Shota was silent, letting him continue. Bakugo bullied Midoriya for several years. I just went back as far as primary school, but even then it had obviously been going on for a while. But I also looked a bit into their earliest records and they had apparently been quite close. So Bakugo bullied him because he's quirkless and he doesn't like that Midoriya made it into UA? Arriving at the foot of Sagiri Mountain, the place Izuku was told to come to, he was surprised by how empty it was. He was used to the large neighborhoods to Mustafu and the hustle everyone seemed to be in. He shouldered his backpack and continued on up the mountain. A bit after noon, or so he assumed was noon, he came across a small house with a small path leading to it. Hello? Does anyone live here? I'm looking for an Urokadaki Sakanji. Hello. He walked up to the door, knocking. Who's there? A man called out. My name is Midoriya Izuku. I'm looking for an Urokadaki Sakanji. The man opened the door, face obscured by a mask he couldn't recognize. The man gave Izuku an up and down before asking, what do you need with him? I was looking through my dad's stuff and his name was on a letter. I wanted to know if you knew him. Izuku knew he was stupid to ask this. He had left without really telling his mom where he was going, using the excuse of a camping trip with friends to leave. The man paused, letting himself think what to do next. You're looking for me because of your dad? Yeah, he died when I was little and yeah. Izuku looked down, now slightly embarrassed by how little he had thought this through. What random man who knew his dad would just let him stay with him? Who's your dad? Midoriya Hisashi. When he said Hisashi, the man leaned forward, briefly sniffing Midoriya. I don't know him. Izuku whipped his head up to the man fast enough he saw spots for a second before blubbering. He wasn't a Midoriya, that's mom's name. I don't remember. Oh, Kamadu Hisashi. The man now uncrossed his arms. He's your dad. Yeah. After that, the man with the mask invited Izuku in the small abode, introducing himself as Urokadaki. He asked Midoriya what he liked to do for fun, what his favorite food is, polite, non-intrusive questions while making some tea for the two of them. Midoriya paused when he was asked what he wanted to do. I don't know what I want to do. I mean, I have to finish middle school, but I don't know about after that. Don't kids want to be? The man snapped his fingers as if that would help him remember, heroes or whatever they're called? I guess, I just don't really want to be a hero. I want to do something else. The man gave Izuku a cup of tea. Why is that? Midoriya paused, wondering if he should tell the man about his run-in with All Might. I actually met the #1 hero on my way here. He saved me from a villain, but after I asked if I could be a hero. He left out the part where he saw the man's true form, deciding the man shouldn't know that. And it didn't go over very well? The man sat down across from the small boy. He told me to be a police officer because I'm quirkless. Somehow, the conversation that day traveled to Midoriya's father, and he was told about breathing forms and demon slayers. He was told about how no matter what he tried, Hisashi couldn't figure out how to use the breathing techniques. Urokodaki offered to teach Midoriya for 1 year and give him the opportunity to try for himself. And the funny thing is that he accepted. Urokodaki took him to town and called his mother, explaining everything, and soon it was just them and the forest. For almost 6 months Midoriya woke up at the crack of dawn to run up and down the mountain. He was taught how to hold a sword and how to use it. Never, since the first day of this cycle, did the man mention breathing. Just before the 6-month mark of Midoriya living on a mountain to basically experiment, Urokodaki coughed. Yes, people cough from time to time, but then he started to cough more often. When Midoriya, now dubbed my boy by the older man since he was basically taking care of him, brought it up, he mentioned that Midoriya might have to train himself while he rests, so he was taken up further than he had been before, given a boulder and the promise Urokodaki would get better, and then quiet. For 6 more months he was basically alone. Every time he would go back down to eat and rest, the man would be sleeping. Then one day something changed. It was February. Midoriya was ahead of his usual grade level already, so he hadn't worried about his studies, but it was cold. He was huddled tight in the hayori, looking at the boulder he was supposed to slice before he left. Looking at it isn't helping anyone. Izuku looked up, seeing a masked figure perched on the boulder. From his time with Urokodaki, he picked up on the man's manners and over time had copied them himself. Usually he knew what to say, but this time he had no idea how to approach the conversation. We're going to show you how to use water breathing, so hopefully you can actually do it. Your father's quirk prevented us from helping, and prevented him from learning. Pull out your sword, let's spar. Before he knew it, he was sparring the boy, person. He lost a lot. Soon a younger girl came and showed him how to fall, pausing the spar every so often to correct him or suggest what he does next. Over time, this became routine, Izuku coming up to the boulder, sparring with the boy he now knew as Sabito, Makomo coming after about an hour, and then after lunch Sabito would leave for a bit while she would, occasionally, beat the new technique into him. Soon he learned that the new technique was a water-breathing form and he would be able to see the water flow. She would congratulate him each time, Sabito giving him a small nod the next time he saw the boy. He didn't know where they came from or why they were helping him, but he accepted their help each day. One day they didn't come, instead a girl in a pink kimono came. She didn't say anything at first, just taking his arms and placing them in a defensive position. She stood across from him, in the same position. Just copy me, and try to put as much power into each movement as you can. She did different moves for another hour, going over some if he fell or did something wrong. The next day none of the 3 people came, instead a boy in a checkered hayori coming. Hello. I'm Kamado Tanjiro. Tanjiro, as he introduced himself, evidently was once for conversation, so Izuku replied. Kamado. Izuku had been too distracted to notice the boy's family name before his brain processed it. The boy confirmed his earlier fact. Yeah. Kamado Tanjiro. Do you know a Kamado Hisashi? Izuku asked, hope bubbling in him. I don't think so. Kamado is an old name. Do you know how long it's been in your family? I think my dad had said it was always in the family. Well, in that case, we're gonna do something different. That day, and for the rest for the week, Tanjiro showed him 12 new forms, but Izuku could never make anything happen. It was just him swinging a sword around. On the last day he would ever see the 4 people, it was the 1.5-year mark of him living on the mountain. Sabito, Makomo, Tanjiro and Nezuko all awaited him by the boulder. The next day of school Ochoko Uraraka walked the distance from her family's apartment to the train station. Her parents tried their best to be around as much as they could, but since there wasn't much work they were constantly trying to find something to do. Last night her parents had been talking about some construction they were hired to do, and they were so happy to tell her that the people who hired them asked for some more work after the current job. Of course she was elated to hear that, but her parents had to leave early in the morning, an hour before herself. Thinking back to the previous day, she thought about the quirk apprehension tests. She had scored relatively high, Between the infinity ball throw and the muscles she had gained with her parents, she had a bit of a head start from everyone else. In the locker rooms she had gotten to know the other girls a bit better. After Mineta had been expelled and the tests, there had been a small celebration. Tsuyu, or Tsu as she preferred, had become fast friends with her, and they bonded over the other girls' adorable younger siblings. Tsu had congratulated her for making it to UA, and they promised to always help each other, no matter what. Uraraka volunteered to help babysit if Tsu ever needed it, the other girls joining her. After Tsu had stopped crying, they walked out together, trading numbers and promises. Once she made it to the school and navigated through the small crowd of reporters who wanted to know what the new students were like with Hakigure, they took a moment to realize just how big it was. I thought it was big on the first day, but Aizawa-sensei must have said something because now it seems bigger. Hagakure remarked. Uraraka nodded. Yeah, now we have to work to stay here. When they made it to the classroom, there were only a few kids there, the angry kid, the fast kid, and the kid she threw the ball for with green hair. The boy was taking a notebook out of his bag with a pencil. Deciding to introduce herself, she power-walked over to him, trying to find the courage to, frankly, talk to a kid that pretty. Hi, I'm Ichoko Uraraka. She stuck her hand out. It was kinda cool how you found a way around the tests, didn't you do really well? He took her hand after a moment of hesitation, nodding. Midoriya Izuku. Thanks for helping me with the ball throw. Yeah, I did pretty well. 3rd place in all. He pulled his hand back, grabbing his pencil. Hey, what's your quirk? Uraraka paused for a second before replying. Oh yeah, we should know our friends' quirks. Midoriya froze before nodding again. It's called zero gravity. I can make things weightless when I touch them with all 5 fingers. He wrote it down in the margins of the notebook for English. You can't just remove something's gravity though. He remarked, not noticing her shocked face. What's your quirk? Interrupting, the hobo-looking man put a stop to their conversation. If you're here to make friends, you can go home. The rest of the morning went by relatively uneventfully. The teachers were mostly doing some introductions and then a review of what they will be covering in the class. There would be optional electives as second years that they could work towards, but nothing was fun until lunch. The girls sat together, a few boys refused to let the angry boy be alone, and the rest mostly sat together. There were 2 kids that Uraraka noticed sitting together, away from everyone else. Midoriya and the boy with 2 colored hair sat together. Not once during lunch did she notice them talk to each other. They just ate noodles together and finished some all about me assignments for tomorrow. The girls had a blast together though. Mina and Yamamo were making plans for a girls' night. Tsu and Hagakure were talking music with Jiro while Uraraka herself would listen to both conversations. Suddenly the bell rang, students everywhere rushing to put the plates away and go to their next class. 1A quickly walked to their classroom, fundamental heroics being too exciting for them to want to be late. They all sat at their desks and waited, and waited, and waited for their teacher to come through the doorway. Eventually they started guessing who the teacher could be. The said teacher was almost 10 minutes late before a booming voice from the other side of the doorway echoed. I am here, coming through the door like a normal person. Almost everyone cheered. Uraraka noticed Midoriya scooting down his chair out of the corner of her eye, but was too wrapped up in the moment to even give him a glance. He wasn't wearing his usual costume, deciding to go old school. It looked like he hadn't changed an inch from the last time he wore it. He walked, frankly like a robot, to the podium before making another announcement, even though he can't do anything other than announcements. Today we're doing indoor battle trials. All Might announced, not bothering to introduce himself. And for that you'll need these. He pressed a button, the wall expanding into shelves with their costume cases. Put them on and we'll meet up at ground beta for more explanation. He then left the room and students rushed to their case. Stepping out of the locker room with the girls, she felt the tight-fitting fabric and adjusted her bracelets. While they were changing, the other girls had already started figuring out what they wanted changed. Uraraka wanted something looser, Yamamo wanted some pants, Hagakure was wondering if she really had to be naked. Overall, they looked good and over-sexualized, and were pretty happy with their costumes. When they reached the building they were supposed to meet at, some of the boys were already there. More accurately, Todoroki and Midoriya. Todoroki looked kinda scary, ice covering half his body with a red glowing eye. Jiro voiced this, but the boy simply turned away, looking at the monitors showing the security. Midoriya, however, had a totally different look. He looked like he came out of a traditional painting with his split haori and zori sandals. On the right half of his haori was a blue sky and cloud patterns, guess who, and his left side was covered in a plain dark purple. Under that was layers, a dark gakuren jacket, a white belt, baggy pants that extend into tabi socks, a pair of zori with red straps, and odd bands of white cloth wrapped tightly around his calves, Demon Slayer uniform. Looking over the girls' costumes, he too turned to the monitors, awaiting All Might to come. And we will be determining the teams via random selection. Since there is 19 of you, someone will be on a team by themselves. After the fast boy, Ida, interrupted and Yamamo explained that heroes don't get to determine their teams, All Might selected the teams. Todoroki Shoto and Tsuyu Azui vs Shoji Mizo and Tokoyami Fumikichi. Aoyama Yuga and Ishido Mina vs Kaminari Denki and Jiro Kyoka. Ojiro Mashireo and Hakigure Toru vs Yaoyorozu Momo and Ida Tenya. Kirishima Idru and Shiro Hanta vs Sato Rikido and Kota Koji. Midoriya Izuku vs Uraraka Ochako and Bakugo Katsuki. Chapter text. The first team that went was Todoroki and Azui vs Shoji and Tokoyami. Izuku had noticed Todoroki was one to shy away from everyone else, and he was one of the first people out of the locker room. His costume was interesting anyways, and Midoriya stored that fact away for later. After the 15 minutes of prep each team had gotten went by, Azui was about to walk in when Todoroki pulled her back to the sidewalk, walking in himself. Soon the building was somehow covered in ice and the heroes were declared the winners. Azui must have been shivering because he placed his left hand on her back and she immediately relaxed. The next match was Aoyama and Mina vs Denki and Jiro. Aoyama was grumpy at Mina from the very beginning, which seemed to set the tone for the rest of the match. Denki and Jiro worked well once they started focusing on the battle trial. It was close, but the only reason the heroes won was Mina's ability to do a flip. Ojiro and Hagakure vs Yaoyorozu and the Ida kid was disappointing. Hagakure immediately took off her gloves and boots, which made Ojiro uncomfortable. When the Grace PRD was over, Ida immediately rushed off and had gotten Ojiro quickly, but also ruined their plan quite quickly. Honestly, he kept telling people to follow the rules and he couldn't follow their plan. Yaoyorozu's plan consisted of a fine white powder for Hagakure, which worked until she realized how well the invisible girl could fight. Nonetheless, the villains still won due to Ida's ability to rush in places. With the next match, Midoriya made it his mission to become Koda's friend. Koda was the eyes and ears of the villains, Sato not really doing anything until the end when he needed to get to Shiro quickly. Of course the heroes still won, Shiro's maneuverability and Kirishima's hardening overpowering Sato's temporary strength and Koda's pure kindness. Koda didn't even fight and still lasted the longest against them. He just kept distracting them. Of course Midoriya was the most excited for his match, wary of the turnout. Either Bakugo reveals him as quirkless and they question his ability to fight, or Bakugo reveals him as quirkless and they question his, breathing. It was right before he left All Might wished him luck and only then did he realize he was in the hero course at UA. Toshinori Yagi did not consider himself a quirkist person. He himself was once quirkless, and he thought the experience of trying to be a hero was difficult. He simply didn't want other quirkless people to get hurt. Now, only Nizu and Aizawa had done a deep dive into the students, but he still had a list of the students' quirks. And imagine his surprise when he sees a student without a quirk listed. Obviously he wasn't written down as quirkless either, and a lot of his test scores were blank, but Yagi brushed it off as Nizu's doing, something he didn't need to nose around. Class had been going perfect, he managed to explain the exercise well and there weren't any difficult questions. He also managed to not use too much muscle time during the instruction time. None of the students were doing anything totally out of the box, sans Todoroki freezing the building. Of course he didn't notice this though, he didn't think anything could possibly go wrong. And in a funky way, he was right. Nothing went wrong, there was just a technical issue. A really bad technical issue. Later he would be informed that a support class student was experimenting with security programming and corrupted some that was currently rolling. The green-haired boy, who looked so very familiar, but he couldn't place it, had been quiet the whole time other teams were fighting. In fact, he hadn't said a word. He was wearing some traditional-looking clothing, and when the pink-haired girl, Mina, asked him about it, he simply looked away, to where Dark Shadow was attempting to break the ice. But now the boy had looked at the map of the layout and folded the paper, putting it in his belt that was holding the large sword Yagi was wary of letting him use. He then spent the rest of the preparation time inspecting the building. Uraraka had been having a difficult time trying to get Bakugo to work with her. He didn't listen to her or her ideas, only telling her to stay out of the way. The girl was obviously worried, but after a while she started to look for objects she could float. After the 15 minutes, Bakugo immediately blasted off towards the entrance of the building. Uraraka finished laying some traps, and Midoriya ran to the back wall of the building. And he just started climbing as if he had been doing it for years. He expertly found handholds, not even using his feet when there was no place for them. Awe spread through the observing classmates, Ida being one of the few actually worried about his safety, while some of the girls commented about how hot he looked. Even some of the boys, namely Kirishima, Kaminari, Aoyama, and Tashinori, swore he heard Todoroki comment on it. Midoriya managed to sneak into the second floor, almost directly above Bakugo, who was aggressively stalking around the first floor. He then took a sharp turn to the empty elevator. And then, it went black. Every camera went dark with static. After a quick check, Tashinori determined they had lost their eyes and ears in the building and surrounding areas. Oh my god, what's going on in there? Yaoyorozu was among the most concerned. She had somehow managed to put herself in a position where she cared for everyone. Azui spoke up. Karo, Bakugo looked really angry. Maybe some people should go check it out. But at the same time, this could be a test of their response. All Might kept giving us advice during our trials. They'll have to tell something is up when he doesn't say anything to them. Yeah, this could be a test of their manliness. Dude, I don't think that's how this works. Kaminari corrected. Hello? Bakugo? Are you there? Silence filled the earpiece, only worrying Uraraka. Bakugo hadn't listened to her, but he had answered her check-ins when he first blasted off. Then there was the sound of a brick falling. There were no bricks in the building. She knew that when she had scoured the building for projectiles. Deciding to woman up and investigate, it wasn't long before she stepped into the dark hallway. Then there was a shuffle, like the shuffle you make when you move your blankets. Slowly turning around, something launched at her, and the next thing she knew was that she was wrapped in capture tape and seated comfortably against the wall. Bakugo was 100% ready to rock Deku's sheet. After the demon brat left the FING school, he didn't really have anything to do. He couldn't even figure out a new way to use his quirk because the nerd wasn't muttering about it anymore. Of course, no one had really noticed Deku left. The quirkless loser's disappearance was actually celebrated for a day before everyone just glossed over it. After he took the entrance exam, the hag and old man had seemed to be in better spirits, but he just took it as them being happy he did well and was bragging about it to all the other extras. Looking back, or at least as much as he was willing to, they were probably not even happy about his results, but instead being nicer because Deku was back after leaving for 2 years. Now he's taller, slightly less of a stick, and had a new haircut to boot. Despite what everyone else seems to think, Bakugo does have a brain. He couldn't just attack the nerd, he could only really do so during training. And if he isn't going to abuse that and put more force than necessary to do that, well, no one needs to know. Uraraka was barely able to keep her eyes open. Her neck was sore where Midoriya had hit it, sleep threatening to take over. No, she had to know if he would win. He didn't appear to have burns on him, so he had avoided her teammate somehow. The brick he had dropped was sitting a few feet away from her, next to the door. He left, going in the direction of the faux bomb. WT. She called out weakly, causing him to turn around and appear back in her field of vision. Sorry, the windows aren't mirrored, so I just looked through them. You should sleep, you'll feel better. And he disappeared again, taking his beautiful, comforting, smooth, confident voice with him. DMN, has she already started crushing on someone? After losing sight of his Haori, she closed her eyes. The last thing she was aware of was the automated announcement of the heroes obtaining the bomb. Sitting in my dark office with the projector on isn't something that typically happens. Occasionally I will turn off the lights if I feel too stressed, something my staff tends to forget can happen to me. In fact, I don't even get stressed that often, a headache only really occurring when I have to deal with the hero commission. But I have painstakingly cleaned the old projector and aimed it at the now empty wall by the door. The blinds are doing the best they can to black out the room, and even my monitor screen is off. And I have done all of this for the sole purpose to take a mostly break day and watch my future student navigate his first full day of school. And the results are quite interesting. Firstly, he isn't used to being around so many people and is used to much quieter surroundings, and as much as it is funny to watch new students get lost on their way to class, he only got lost a few times until figuring out the pattern to the halls and classrooms. This was also proved by his actions during the breaking during lunch. Totally didn't forget that it happens. He had been quick to get Todoroki to the nearest shelter and attempt to find out what was going on, despite the upperclassmen claimed they knew what was going on, a simple break-in, but realistically it could have been anything. He obeyed the PA's orders, but still did some quick investigation, something Nizu personally found important above all else, something he thinks truly makes someone a hero. Second, he has some form of PTSD caused by Bakugo. This much is proven by the amount he has flinched when the boy used his quirk. He also moves away from him when possible appropriate. The most unfortunate part of the day was the support student who corrupted the security files a moment after the planning PRD was over. Unfortunately, due to this the live footage that was rolling disconnected, and no matter what I did I couldn't fix it. Oh well, just another thing we should find a solution to. Now Aizawa, his favorite staff member, only because his capture weapon is extremely warm and the man doesn't mind carrying his around, was on his way to his office to talk about what to do with the green-haired boy. Since he had already made significantly more progress exercising his body and honing his skills more than his classmates, there was very little reason to keep him in basic heroics since he'd already shown that he understood the point. In maximizing his time planning by stretching as he got to the testing building, he showed that he had the ability to get ready in, he timed it, 2 minutes and 32 seconds if you include changing, a minimal amount of time. And there was the small fact that the last time he had spoken with Urokodaki the man was in excellent shape despite looking, quite frankly, old. Nizu finds it quite difficult to believe he wasn't the one responsible for Midoriya's stamina. Turning on the lights and shutting off the projector as the boy left campus and Aizawa was walking up the stairs, he allowed himself a minute to turn on his monitor and make another cup of tea for himself. So perfectly timed, just as it should be. Aizawa, how are you? He chirped as the man walked through the threshold of the office. Currently welcoming death, the man deadpanned, opening his thermos to take a sip of presumably coffee. Problem child is like the Jesus of keeping his skill sets hidden. Yes, I noticed that too. Yesterday the tests had been taking place in a terrible place for spying on him, so I didn't get to watch him. Though today, the support course issue covered his tracks for him. You don't know what happened at the tests yesterday? Aizawa looked confused, angry, disappointed and slightly relieved all at the same time, a face that truly didn't suit the man. No, I didn't ask because you needed the spare time to get to your agency building. There had been worse traffic than usual and the man always left right after school so he could sleep any extra time away at the agency. Well, he's a long-distance runner, that's for sure. I'd like to watch him try parkour personally. Even in the 50-meter dash he had conserved his energy. He did really well in the grip strength test, though it seems like he's stronger in his legs and core. During the side steps he was doing well before he dropped out once he made it about as long as Yaoyorozu did, maybe a bit longer. He had tossed the ball to Uraraka to use her quirk on for him. When he heard that Nizu couldn't help but let a smile slip, he'd found a loophole in the rules. Nizu, he FANG flipped over the sandbox, like the whole sandbox. There's no way someone can just do that, even if I probably couldn't, maybe if I gave it a few tries. Otherwise he ran loops around everyone else without them noticing a thing and was pretty flexible doing the toe touch. He flipped over a 6-meter sandbox without a running start? Nizu, I watched him myself. He didn't take a running start. I don't think that's happened. We really should install some more cameras. What about the sit-ups? I had him partner with me because there was only 19 kids. I asked him to stay after school today to retake them, but you probably saw him. He's in no place to take them now. That was true. He'd been especially jumpy after the All Might's battle trials. We have the field trip tomorrow. I'll have him stay back after the bus ride back. Good idea. I might ask if I can watch if you don't mind. Nizu took a long sip of his almost cool tea. Have you noticed his relationship with Todoroki? Aizawa almost chuckled. How they seem to stick together. Yeah, it'll be good for the kid. Indeed. Perhaps he will be able to help me in my effort to make a case against Todoroki's father. Nizu hummed. Aizawa scrunched his eyebrows together. Endeavor? What did he do? I think the more appropriate question is what he didn't do. When Rei Todoroki heard her son made it into UA, which was a few weeks late, she emailed me to help him. And you couldn't turn that down? Now Nizu chuckled. No, I could not. Though I did want to talk about moving electives forward for the first years. Aizawa looked utterly flabbergasted. What? These kids can barely turn paperwork in on time, and you think they have the time management skills for electives. True, not all of them do, but Midoriya does. We don't have to offer all of them. The extra time to practice their Quirk Cementos offers would benefit them, and Midnight Study Hall would help. We probably shouldn't offer the hand-to-hand class or Snipes gun certification class to them yet, but I doubt student-led clubs will help them that much. They already have their groups and have made plans to study together. Aizawa couldn't deny the last point. Somehow his class has enough of a variety of people that they seem to already figure out who they click with the most. Talk to the rest of the staff. Vlad will want 1B to wait. Well, he's always going to be stubborn about them. He isn't the biggest fan of electives in the first place. He won't want to offer them early. Izuku was running late after stopping by a cafe for some tea. It was already 7:35 and the train he needed to take was due to arrive in 10 minutes. He was running past a bank when a huge villain burst out of the street in front of him. Two of the newer heroes were chasing him. The Mountain One and Kamui Woods were chasing him until the villain glanced at a family frozen in fear. Luckily Midoriya was right next to them and could inconspicuously grab the two kids before the two adults were grabbed by the villain. The adults shrieked in fear while the two kids held Izuku tight. He backed up a bit, Kamui having seen him and nodding in appreciation. Now his stupid uniform was wrinkled, right after his mom had shown him how to iron it last night. Don't even think about chasing me or these lovely people of unfortunate circumstances, gets it? The villain squeezed the couple tighter. You're charged with serial larceny and murder, Vihara. It keeps auto-correcting to Vigora. I spent too long fixing that headgear. Mountain Lady exclaimed. Then, please save us. He's too fast for us to capture Mount. Mommy, no, you need to go. You and I. Everyone shouted. Except Kamui, he only murmured the issue, just loud enough for his partner to hear. Suddenly Izuku felt the air shift. No one else had noticed, only his training in thin air giving him the ability to feel it. Something big was coming, fast. Have no fear. I am here. Missouri Smamashosh. All Might came blasting out of nowhere, chopping Headgear's neck and scooping the two women in his arms. For I was just on my way for work. Mountain Lady was relieved but slightly annoyed that he came. Kamui Woods was approaching Izuku, the kids he saved, having run to their moms when All Might let them down. Thanks, kid. It could have been different if they didn't get out of the way. Izuku simply rubbed the back of his neck. I just didn't want them to have that experience. You go to UA? You're going to run late since you need to give a statement. Can I offer to drive you there? Ah, thanks, I'd appreciate it. No problem. And that's how Midoriya not only became friends with a newly debuted hero but arrived at school late only with a slip that only read, "This kid saved 2 kids this morning. Don't hassle him for being late, please." Kamui Woods, and a new saved number in his phone, of course that only happened after going to a police precinct and talking to about 4 officers, retelling the story twice and got a new cup of tea as he had dropped his when he grabbed the kids. Just sit down, Midoriya. Aizawa looked tired but he didn't bring out his sleeping bag, which reminded Izuku of the field trip that was planned for today. He was lucky his mom had shown. him the email about it, or he would probably be as confused as his classmates were. We're going on a trip to one of UA's facilities. Change into your costumes and go to loading zone 2, I'll meet you there. With that the man turned and left, not even telling them where their costumes were or where loading zone 2 was. Luckily the wall opened again, revealing the costumes. Yesterday the support course had been withholding his sword since they didn't know how to put it in his case, so it was sheathed in a smaller box today. It was a small thing, but he liked the feeling of his former master's sword on his hip. Once he figured out where he was supposed to go, he was pleasantly surprised that he had gotten there first, his teacher leaning against the bus. To cure the awkward silence he spoke up, Sensei, I didn't stay yesterday to retake the test but was interrupted by the man. Just stay late today and don't forget, yesterday was a mess and I had to leave anyways. After that was a much less awkward silence while everyone else arrived slowly. Soon everyone loaded into the bus. Todoroki sat next to Midoriya, taking the aisle seat next to him in the back. Izuku relished the coolness of his right side before his teacher set some ground rules. Don't wake me up, don't be too loud, and choose a class representative before we get there. And sat down, finally taking out his yellow cocoon. Neither Izuku or Todoroki participated in deciding how to choose a class rep, but eventually they made a system where everyone closed their eyes and would clap once to vote for someone, Yaoyorozu saying everyone's names in alphabetical order. Eventually Ida was chosen for class rep and Yaoyorozu split the job of assistant representative with Tsuyu. During this process after he voted, Todoroki gently leaned on Izuku, briefly catching rest for the day today. He'd done the same thing during lunch before the intruder alarm went off. When he'd woken up he simply said it was hard to sleep sometimes, so Izuku wasn't put off by it. Hi, it's the author. How does Todoroki get sleep? I find it hard to believe that he can just sleep normally without issue, especially since in the manga anime he had never told anyone and kept it bottled up before Midoriya popped up. They had just made it to a huge dome when Midoriya got a text from his mother. Hey Izuku honey, I know you have a field trip today and I hope you do well, but there are these two girls here asking for you. Can you come home right after school today? After he got the kids out of the bus, the demon brats had been too loud for him to sleep, which was a first. 13 had been waiting outside for them. Hello and welcome to the USJ. The students started freaking out that they were here, and when 13 opened the large doors the excitement only grew. It's as big as Universal Studios Japan. They have a whole boat in here. How big do you think the letters for the fire room are? Hey, before we go in there is something I need to say, maybe 2, no 3 or 4, anyways. The kids' sweat dropped. And with that 13 showed their quirk and started a quick speech. Flood wrecks, landslides, fires, etc. This is a practical training area I made to simulate them all. It's the ultimate space for jams. 13. Right to the important things. I'm certain you're all quite aware, but my quirk is called black hole. No matter what material may be seeking into its vortex, I'm afraid it will turn into dust. It is also a power that could also easily be used to kill people, and in that way it's no different from the quirks of everyone here. Problem child number 2 glanced to problem child number 1, which did not escape Todoroki's watchful gaze. Naturally, in this society of superhumans, quirks are strictly regulated and the requirements for their lawful uses are strongly enforced. We can tell at a glance that that is the makeup of this current world. That being said, please don't forget that each of you possesses a quirk that can go awry. One wrong step is all it takes to be able to kill others accidentally. During Aizawa-senpai's tests you learned of your respective powers' true potential, and during All Might's battle trials I think you took away a true sense of the danger of brandishing those powers against one another. Most of the staff by now, except the ones that would come later in the year for second and third years, had learned what happened during the battle trials. A tech issue had caused students to be in a potential deadly situation, as most of the staff had been told about problem child number 2 and how he shouldn't really be partnered with problem child. Problem child number 1 seemed a bit out of his depth in the beginning of their speech, but after he nodded his head with each thing they said. Problem child number 2 was just watching the green-haired boy, but when the boy flinched ever so slightly, Shoyuta couldn't help but notice the gaze flashed guilt for a split second. Problem child number 1 had maneuvered around Todoroki so that the taller boy was in between him and not only Bakugo but 13 too. The poor kid looked honest to jelly packets, scared about people just using their quirks willy-nilly. Something Shoyuta is going to have to tell Nedza later. 13 turned to him and he quietly walked to them, raising a 3 when they asked about All Might. Then, when 13 had been leading the kids in the dome, the doors slammed shut and a dark mist filled the middle. From there dozens of villains walked out. The kids behind him started panicking. Among Yaoyorozu and Todoroki outwardly surprised, problem child number 1 started fidgeting, not scared fidgeting, but anxious fidgeting. He looked sick and fortunately because he was so surprised, Todoroki grabbed his arm to ground himself, probably not even noticing problem child number 1 relaxed when he did so. As more villains filtered through, they only got bigger until they mist-shrunk to form a more humanoid form. The last person through had light blue hair and disembodied hands on his body. There was a pro to this. Because he didn't need to lead them around anywhere, he had slipped into a spot just behind problem child number 1 and Todoroki. Due to this, he could hear the light murmuring that was coming from problem child number 1, quiet analysis on the intruders, only really catching parts of it. I have to get back for the Ubuyashiki twins. The alarms aren't going off so there is probably a quirk blocking them. The mist guy has that brace, so perfect timing on their part, likely trying to fish someone out, kinda like the headgear guy's quirk today. Hair bullets, school is like 3 kilometers away. Todoroki, after hearing his new more or less friend, turned, looking for Shoyuta. Once he found the man, he simply got a nod in response. Shoyuta walked ahead of them. Stay with the group, problem child, you could have mentioned you analyzed too. Problem child number 1 blushed, or at least as much as he could in the situation. Oh, I haven't done it in a while dash. Stay with the group, don't get hurt, don't get yourself targeted. With 3 whole pieces of wisdom, he leaps down the stairs to buy time for his students. Never mind, the students aren't doing anything, which would be good in literally any other situation. The mist guy is with them and there might be a bit too many thugs for him to handle. Thanks to what he picked up from problem child number 1, he had quickly sliced through them like butter, specifically targeting anyone who looked like they might even have an electricity quirk. The what appears to be leader had been standing mostly in one spot, watching him. Shoyuta was getting tired. Yes, he was an underground pro hero, but he always had some form of backup. Here he couldn't radio for sheet. Because the lights were somehow still working, he had to keep jumping around so no one would notice his hair. He had taken down about half of them and somehow the hand villain pinned him down. He was trying so hard to struggle against the relatively small adult when the weight lifted off of him and he had barely a moment to look and see his student. Scared out of her mind staring at the hand guy. His shoulder and elbow were in so much pain and he had only forced that out of his mind when he felt a chill on his neck. He hadn't been shot by anything and he was doing well in canceling only the quirks he needed to as to not strain himself, but there was an unmistakable chill on his neck that was oddly reassuring. Sue was frozen. Just moments ago she was listening to 13 finish a speech about quirks and then talking to the girls about how exciting it was and then she stood frozen watching villains filter in the dome. It wasn't supposed to go like this, but she prided herself on not panicking as much as she wanted to. Soon Aizawa-sensei jumped down to fight the villains and 13 got everyone moving towards the doors. Hurry back to the bus. Suddenly the black mist was in front of them. I don't think so, it said, revealing piercing yellow eyes. I'm afraid we haven't introduced ourselves yet. We are the League of Villains. Now, I believe All Might is supposed to be here, yes? We were looking to eliminate him today. 13 pushed themselves in front of everyone, her own classmates. I'm going to have to ask you to take your leave now. They flipped one of the fingers of their suit open when Bakugo and Kirishima, who had made it more or less his mission to befriend the angry boy. Sue panicked for real when the mist man simply rearranged himself back. Now, that's no way to treat a guest. In return I see it fit for you to, his mist began to expand. Be scattered. The mist expanded more, soon enveloping her and her classmates. She did everything in her power to slow her panicked breaths. And tortured. The mist took the shape of a dome, trapping everyone in its darkness. She formed a fist, using a trick she had taught herself to calm down and remain level-headed when she was scared, like when her big sister was raped and killed right in front of her and oh god she can't breathe anymore. And slain. Tightening her fist and tensing her legs, she forced the demon memory out of her head and calmed herself once again. She felt an old sensation and soon smelled chlorine? And finally the last thing she heard, every last one of you. She fell into water and only her reflexes got her moving towards the biggest shadow she could see in her faint panic. No, behind her, someone just fell in too, and she found herself turning to grab someone with her tongue and practically jumping to the boat. Luckily, it could have been a villain or worse, and she didn't want to think about that. Once she calmed herself and got the water out of her eyes, she could finally see the person she saved. Midoriya? Karo, are you okay? He had been resting a hand on her shoulder, totally calm, scanning her for any injuries. The green-haired boy had never spoken a word in front of her, and was now wringing out the little water that had seeped into his haori, something she had never really seen before, except at a special pre-modern era museum show. Gomen, yes I'm okay. I'm more worried about you. He now slipped the split almost coat and had stood, turning to fully face her. I'll be okay. Do you know what happened, Karo? There was the mist and then I fell into the water. Not totally. He looked out across the water and she stood next to him, noticing they were surrounded by villains in the water. What's your quirk? We should see if we can get to the entrance. Karo, it doesn't do too much. I'm good at swimming and jumping. My tongue can go a maximum of 20 meters and can hold a bit of weight, just not for very long, Karo. I can stick to a wall for a few minutes. That's all the cool stuff. It's pretty gross, but I can also eject everything from my stomach and wash it. She paused, looking at the boy. I'm sorry, I tend to speak my mind, but your costume is pretty different from everyone else's. Karo. He turned to face her again, a faint smile on his face, barely pulling his lips up. It's from my... Never mind. Do you think you could jump to the shore? She looked out in front of the boat again before replying. Maybe, but it might be just a bit too far. I wouldn't be able to take you, Karo. That's okay. He turned away from her again, letting a silence slip between them. He furrowed his brows. Midoriya-kun, do you have a plan? He didn't turn to her, now looking out across the water to watch Aizawa-sensei fight the villains. Yes, but I don't know, I have this weird feeling. He relaxed after he said that, his brow returning to a neutral expression. Let's dash. Let's hurry up these brats, I'm hungry. A huge water hand came out of the water, splitting the boat they were on in half. Just before this, however, they saw their teacher get pinned by the guy with all the hands. Ah, what's your name? Her admittedly good-looking partner asked her, momentarily taking her out of the panic she felt, almost wanting to laugh as she only really knew his name because everyone had gossiped about his ball throw. Tsu Azui, call me Tsu though. Okay. Right, Tsu, get a running start and get to the shore. What about you? You need to go now. There was something about the urgency in his voice that she would remember and question for years after her first year, and even though she wouldn't really ever find out what about it fascinated her, it would often be the only thing keeping her from freezing in the face of a hostage situation, or when Selkie got killed by an accidental explosion. You need to go now would be the only thing getting her to move. How little did she know, she would be writing about this very experience in a year. This moment would be so bittersweet for her. But now she was almost flying through the air, solely focused on the landing and avoiding the villains. But the landing wasn't half the issue. No, now the boat moment with Midoriya at the USJ was over, and her nightmare would begin here. She landed in the closest area of shore to the boat, which was right in between the boat where Midoriya was and the fight in the plaza. But she barely acknowledged Midoriya, because the hand villain saw her, and she was not in a good position, her leg muscles tired from the jump she had strained herself so much to cover. But as she was staring at the villain who was, oh god, he's running at her really fast, she felt a chill run down her neck and then heard splashes. She didn't know what happened, but all she knew was the left hand of the handman was coming at her. She could almost feel it, and she had been able to catch a glimpse of what it did to her teacher, but the clouds of Midoriya's haori was on her left, and then the handle of his sword that was hidden under it was there, and she swore she could see flowing water, like that out of the really old paintings, and the villain fell, Midoriya's hand blocking her from moving forward. Tsu-chan, do you think you can take Aizawa-sensei to the entrance? And just like that the sword was gone and he was holding both her shoulders to face him. Karo, why? Yeah, but what about you? I'm going to make sure you can get there and take care of the rest of the villains. And then she was holding a slumped black, bloody mess that was barely holding its own weight and being pushed towards where 13 hopefully was. Once the black mist dissipated, it revealed most of the class gone, Ida, Shoji, Sato, 13 and Yaoyorozu being the only ones still in place. 13, still facing the mist man, clenched and unclenched their fists before nearly barking out an order. Shoji, can you confirm everyone is still here? This must have shaken him and Yaoyorozu out of their stupor as Shoji expanded their arms, making a web of ears and eyes. Yes, they're scattered and in disarray, but we're all still here. They continued to stare down the intruder as they thought for a second, class president. Before addressing the engine user, 13 sensei, he replied, instantly at attention. I entrust this to you, please. As fast as you can, run to the school and relay the following. Somehow the alarms never triggered in our phones have lost reception. Our alarms operate by infrared rays. In spite of Eraserhead canceling quirks left and right down below, the continued blocking is likely the work of somebody who hasn't interfered in the battle and wasted no time in hiding themselves. In order to smoke this person out, you must bolt and inform the school of our situation. Ida's eyes widened, his glasses slightly slipping down his nose. But I'm a disgrace to the class if their class representative leaves, he exclaimed. Sato, fortunately, had common sense. He said go, emergency exit. At the reminder of his actions during the intruder alarm, the Ida finally relented. You can alert the outside of what's going on, there's got to be a reason why they made sure to cause no trouble here. That means they won't chase after you if you make it out, so use those legs of yours and kick free of the black mist. Yaoyorozu added, grabbing his shoulder and aggressively turning him towards herself. When you get outside, press this button, it will measure how strong a signal can get through and UA can use that to improve security measures. Nodding, he put himself in a runner's position. Please, use your quirk to save others. And with the final incentive from 13 he blasted off. Yaoyorozu made a magnet gun and shot it at the ceiling behind the mist man and he started flying towards it, giving Ida an opening to get past the villain. He narrowly avoided the villain however, but luckily a piece of cement thrown by Sato kept him from harm's way. Hi, it's the author. I'm just adding the fact that I cannot write when Mika's lollipop is playing, I bounce my shoulders too much. Back to the plots. The doors took some force to open, momentarily stunning him as he remembered how easily 13 had opened them earlier. Eventually, after a few seconds, he saw the sunlight and he bolted. Now he just had to run 3 kilometers to the main building. He immediately pressed the button on the small device his classmate gave him, seeing a green light turn on. Running was difficult for him, not because the action itself was hard, but because Tenya had always been able to think incredibly quickly, easily making connections and noticing patterns in math. So when he was running, he had nothing to think about since running was such an easy task. His brother said that he would often repeat what he was trying to do and any messages he had to send, but would also think about recent experiences and new things he tried. He had said that the first day of UA would often roll through his head, as well as the recent bungee jumping experience he had with some of the sidekicks at his agency. Ida thought back to the warp villain. When he had been in the dome thing, Tsu had been right next to him, and just before he could feel her she had let a tear run down a panicked face. Her breathing was off, and she was just so frozen in place. Deciding to check on her after the mess was over, he continued on to the next running thought. Where would he go? He was supposed to get the teachers, but they have classes and he barely knows where anything is, nonetheless where the principal's office was. Actually, he had taken more injured students to Recovery Girl's office after the entrance exam. Surely she would know what to do. Actually, the entrance exam. Yaoyorozu and Todoroki were the only 2 recommendation students, and yet he didn't remember seeing the green-haired boy anywhere. He would have stood out, even though he was quiet and like Todoroki didn't speak a word in class. He would have likely worn something more traditional? Less modern? Probably not a t-shirt or exercise gear. He was deep in thought when he saw All Might landing about 50 meters in front of him. "Sir." "All Might, sir." Luckily the new teacher noticed and stood up from a crouching position. "Young Ida, what's wrong?" "Sir, the USJ, there's villains, and Aizawa-sensei dash. Please speak in normal sentences, young Ida." Ida, being that he was literally trying not to panic and the teacher in front of him was doing nothing to help, even after hearing that there were villains, did incredibly well in the situation, able to calm himself before continuing. "Sir, when we went inside, dozens of villains started coming through a portal of some sort and spread everyone around the USJ. The alarms have not gone off as far as we can tell, and we think it's due to some sort of quirk. Our phones also didn't have any reception. Aizawa-sensei is currently fighting a large crowd of the villains." "Thank you, young Ida. Please continue to the main building and inform the rest of the teachers." And with the man leaped off again, Ida slightly peeved that he didn't ask if he was hurt or tell him where the teachers could be found. Blasting off once again, though at a slightly slower speed, he continued to the main building. He knew something was wrong. He knew it was a bad idea staying with Principal Nedzu and listening to what he had to say about teaching, but and now what? Now there are villains at the USJ and he wasn't there. Who knew what kind of situation he would find? How long ago did young Ida leave? No, he didn't mention it. Diamenu Yagi, you should have clarified more. Finally, he saw the dome. It wasn't damaged at least, but that only meant there could be bloodshed inside, and Diamond, there are kids in there. Though, if there was any benefit to this, he would at least be testing his suit. A support company had designed it so that it would work as a hero suit too. Slamming the door open, it blasted off its hinges, narrowly missing young Sato. "Diminute Yagi, you could have just opened it normally, oh god." 13. The rescue hero 1A was supposed to be doing rescue training with, had the whole backing of their costume torn off. Young Yayorozu and Shoji were attempting to patch them up best they could, but Aizawa was slumped over young Azui, who was probably seconds away from a panic attack and not letting young Sato check their teacher over. Once they saw the abnormally tall teacher, Sato ran over to him, rambling about, "Sue somehow got out of the water zone, she needs help. You need to tell her to let us check Aizawa-sensei dash." Though it appeared his appearance calmed the panicked girl, as she appeared to have snapped out of a haze and set her teacher down, calling her classmate over for help. From the small glimpse he caught, he almost lost the tea Nedzu had him gulp down. The man had visible muscles, the skin that was supposed to be covering it gone. Forcing himself to look down at the plaza, he was surprised by what was going on. A handman was yelling at a huge beheaded corpse about not following his orders, and what the hell happened? You notice this stupid NPC and just chase after him? What the hell? And the quirkless kid, young Midoriya, holding a slightly bloodied sword, standing his ground, staring at the man-child? Totally calm, and he appeared to be in control of the situation. So when he instinctively yelled, "I am here," and not only pried the attention to himself, he knew he messed up, again, when the mist man used young Midoriya's barely their moment of surprise to attack him. All Might has jumped down, landing just behind the swordsman, and when he heard a faint, seventh form, piercing raindrop, and the boy moved his sword forward, hitting the neck brace the mist figure apparently had. Sliding the brace down, he placed his foot on it, keeping his sword pointed towards the metal plate. And once he did that, he turned to look at the teacher, his eyes an acid green. The handman, throughout this, was simply staring at the trapped man. What the heck? An NPC shouldn't be able to take down Nomu and Kurogiri. Who are you? And after hearing the question, young Midoriya's gaze turned apologetic and sad, softly answering, "I'm the last." Confused, All Might glanced at his student, who no matter how strong and untouchable he seemed to be, only to see a lone tear travel down his cheek and more threatening to come. Toshinori ignored the outcry of, "What the heck, that's not an answer," instead deciding to look as intimidating as he could while the hand villain was relatively distracted, really just an effort to conserve time and not have to move so much. A few minutes passed, the villain still ranting, young Midoriya staring him down again. Young Midoriya, my boy, he missed the flinch and sudden turn of his neck to face the man. Return the front entrance and help your classmates patch up 13 and Aizawa. The boy in question gave him a deadpan face, not believing his teacher actually wanted him to just leave, ignoring the fact that he had captured a villain, one of the main ones in fact. If he moves, I will take care of him. His eyes flashing a dangerous blue to the trapped villain, the student reluctantly stepped off, lifting Kurogiri by the neck brace and handing it to his teacher. I'm not stupid. I'll help them, but you can't let him get loose, he has a teleportation quirk. The other one has a 5-point disintegration quirk, he murmured, starting to walk away. What the heck? You can't just leave. I have to kill you first. The hand villain, now dubbed the disintegration villain, ran towards the hero in training. Fortunately or not, depending on how you look at it, All Might had grabbed the boy and nearly threw him to the small group of students and his teachers, while also dodging the villain himself. He was still put off by the beheaded Nomu, but it was the least of his worries, at least for now. Unfortunately, during the quick movement he let go of Kurogiri, who escaped his firm grasp. Now he was busy trying to dodge two incredibly quick villains until two thankful shots blasted through the air. The hand villain, who Kurogiri had called Shigaraki in an attempt to calm him down, fell, two gunshot wounds landing in his thigh and shoulder. All Might didn't pay attention to the principal's announcement of, "The cavalry has arrived," instead paying attention to Shigaraki's words as the mist enveloped him. Words that, no matter what happens to the man-child, will echo through his head for years to come until he eventually has to slow down and pass on. And Noma had a bunch of cool quirks too. Midoriya, cool name. Uraraka had been stuck in the ruins zone with Kirishima, Hagakure, Ojiro and Siro. They had found each other pretty quickly and Hagakure soon sported Uraraka's bracelets so they could tell where she was pointing. They were a pretty good team, a little rough at first but soon they found their way out of the large room where they were faced with a surprising scene. They had found the door thanks to hearing All Might and the teachers come, but they didn't expect a relatively clean monster laying chest up without a head. She didn't know what to think. When Ectoplasm Sensei's clones rushed over to them, she immediately ran into one, unsure if she was safe yet. One his arms wrapped around her though. She knew she was safe, she knew it was okay to cry now, that she survived. The ruins zone had been full of villains and she was so tired and her wrist hurt so much and she wanted to puke but she couldn't anymore. After about 45 minutes of slowly getting to the door of the entrance, an ambulance had already taken Aizawa-sensei and 13-sensei. She wasn't allowed to hear anything about their conditions, but based on how much blood was on Sato, Tsu, and Shoji, she knew it was bad. She knew something happened and they were hurt, or Aizawa-sensei probably wouldn't have let himself go in an ambulance. Her classmates were upset about it. They had most likely been keeping the teachers alive. Once everybody was outside, most of her classmates were in about the same condition as her, hurt and shaken but okay. She did a mental head count and heard the basics of what happened. Ida was told to run to get the heroes, and met All Might on the way to the main building. The rest of the teachers came soon after. Recovery Girl had employed the extra nearby hospital staff to patch up the students, many of the temporary staff working with a partner to check their work. She got painkillers and her wrist was bandaged tightly with the promise she would tell someone if it started to hurt in any way. The class had formed a large circle, with plenty of space for people to come and go as needed. Todoroki had made sure to stay close to Midoriya, eventually laying his head on his friend's lap and accepting the haori draped over him to warm up. Tsu was adamant on sitting next to Midoriya since they were apparently both dropped in the water zone, forcing him to, in turn, sit near the girls. She sat with the girls, who were talking about how they would improve their costumes. Yaoyorozu and Hagakure were planning to ask if a fabric would be made that still allowed them to use their quirks. Hagakure, no Toru, could have a visible bodysuit that would vanish at will and Yaoyorozu so her quirk could work through the fabric and get gray cargo pants to carry snacks. Jiro wanted something almost totally different, armor that had speakers in it so she wasn't limited to her boots, and Tsu wanted some more comfortable goggles as well as pockets. Soon a detective came and asked if anyone wanted to give their statement first. "I will," Midoriya immediately answered. "I'm the least hurt and my mom needs me to come home as quickly as I can." The detective, Detective Tsukachi, nodded, taking him aside for a few minutes where he mostly listened, occasionally asking questions. Uraraka had to think about the battle trials they did the previous day, when he had been totally confident, and compared that to now. He still walked with confidence and some air of respect? Wisdom? Something, but still fidgeted. He was grasping and letting go of the sword he carried over and over, which made her feel guilty somehow because she was thankful he wasn't going to come out of this unharmed. He must have had to fight villains like the rest of them. And if she noticed the detective giving All Might a disappointed glare, well, it isn't her place to ask. Though she did miss All Might's reaction when he looked down, guilty. Thank you, can an officer take him to get changed and go home? A cat-like officer near the League of Police cars nodded. Thanks, Sansa. Who wants to go next? It was a slow process since a lot more of the students than she expected had broken down in tears, taking more than a few minutes to calm down. Sue in particular had been given a business card and had talked with the man significantly longer than everyone else. Sue, she reached out to the girl whose tears were still running down her face. Are you okay? See, can I have a hug? Of course. She opened her arms, welcoming the girl into them and holding her tight. I had to tell him about my big sister. Uraraka knew it wasn't her place to pry, but she started rubbing the froggy girl's back. She was raped, right in front of me and Dash. Sue, you don't have to tell me now, just relax. She lowered herself into a relatively comfortable sitting position, still holding the girl. Soon she would be found sleeping upright holding her new friend. She would only wake up when it was her turn to give her statement, and that would prompt more tears. Afterwards, she would be comforted by the frog girl, who would only hold her until she could call her parents to sleep over at the girl's house. Shoyuta was barely walking on his own if he was being honest. His legs had barely gotten the stress fractures healed this morning before he picked the window lock open, and the back of his shoulder to his elbow was covered in scar tissue under layers of bandages to keep him from itching at it. Luckily his other arm was operable and wasn't covered in so many bandages so he could still write and pick a lock. Walking to his classroom was a hassle above all else. If Hizashi or Namuri were to find him before he got to it, they would feed him to Recovery Girl. Unfortunately, they were both blocking the door, so he had to take the long way and go through the window. Of course, by the time he got in the room, they had both left to search for him. The students were obediently sitting in their seats, and when he finally turned to face them, the room seemed to explode in sound, frankly irritating his eardrums. Sensei, should you really be teaching today? He's a mummy. You do know that you can rest today, right? Shut up and stay seated. He finally got control of the room with the faint red glow of his eyes just peeking under the bandages. How could he navigate his way around the school and the exterior of buildings? Sheer FING willpower. Today will be one of the most important days of your career. Silence. Today you have to plan how you will train for the sports festival. Sensei, should we really be hosting it after the villain attack? Didn't the school just spend a bunch on security? We have to plan our own schedule? Shut up and let me explain. The school has agreed that if UA can show that they are confident enough in their security to host the festival, especially after the attack, we'll show your parents that they can still teach you. I, of course, wasn't part of this and would have personally voted that we lower the amount of guests. Yes, you have to plan your own schedule, and that is what you will be doing in homeroom. Classes for the next 2 weeks are going to be half their normal length and will only go on during mornings, so you can ask teachers any questions after lunch. He paused, briefly allowing his sore throat a break. However, that means that you have to pay attention in class as no one is lowering the amount of work you're being assigned, unless Recovery Girl has said otherwise. Allowing them a few moments of absolute screeching at him, he cleared his throat again. I don't care what you do to train and will not be a part of your planning process. With the final words, he grabbed his sleeping bag and laid down for a nap in the corner. The kids were actually thinking out their training better than he expected. Ida had suggested they leave a copy of their regime so the teachers know what they will be doing. Now Hauda was looking through them as he waited for the elevator. Jiro had helped Tokoyami, who was going to work with her to increase Dark Shadow's defense against sound waves. A lot of the girls were doing study sessions with Yayorozu and were going to simultaneously help babysit Ajui's siblings somehow. The Baku squad, consisting of Mina, Kirishima, Siro, Kaminari, and Problem Child number 2 were also doing a study session after school and then splitting up after 2 hours. It was problem child number one's that was really what he wanted to bring to Nedzu. It was mostly bare except for Tuesdays and Thursdays that were titled as Rest Days with Shoto and Mom. The same thing was on Todoroki's plan, and if it was his gut feeling or the fact that problem child number one used the boy's first name, something gave him the feeling they knew each other and were closer than what was originally thought. And that brings me to the main reason for this meeting, Midoriya. Nedzu was seated in his large chair, holding a steaming cup of tea. Did he play a role in the USJ events by any chance? Shoyuta was laid across the couch, sitting on the other side of the expansive desk. He, for once, had accepted the offered tea, taking a sip to contemplate how to explain the minimal events he could remember. When the guy Shigaraki was pinning me, I felt a chill. What kind of chill? The one that tickles at your neck, but it wasn't scary or bad. I felt really relaxed. Ease might be a better way to describe it. The principal furrowed his brow, quietly commenting, "How odd. No sheet. I didn't really turn fast enough to see that much, but there was splashing, I think. Like really faint splashing in this huge wave. I think it was a wave coming from somewhere. It wasn't water though, it just looked like it." Coughing, he took another sip of the tea. There was a wave, but it wasn't water? Yeah. You know that old painting, Great Wave? Nedzu typed something into his computer before taking another sip of tea and replying, "Yes. The most famous landscape of 36 views of Mount Fuji." "Yeah, the water looked like that." "Ah, so it doesn't really look like water then." The principal turned back to the hobo-looking man. "There was a huge wave of it and then Shigaraki collapsed. It gets a bit fuzzy after that, but I remember him having Azui take me to the entrance. The kids already up there were talking about how he seemed to have the villains. Oh, I can't recall it. He had been in control of the situation or something." I may owe Midoriya an apology then. It would appear that my opinions on breathing were misplaced. Shuta's eyes widened. When the Chimera had mentioned doubting the reliability of the book on breathing, he hadn't expected the principal to go back on it and entertain the idea of being wrong. Never, in his life, had he heard that the principal was wrong, nonetheless apologize for it. "It is quite unprofessional of me to do this, but I unfortunately have a meeting with the Hero Commission about heroes acting as additional security, so we must move on. In your text you had mentioned Todoroki and Midoriya might know each other more than just new friends." "Yeah, they have Tuesdays and Thursdays as rest days, and you saw them after the attack." The Todoroki kid was shaking until Midoriya came to calm him. "Indeed. He should put it on the back burners for now and focus on what's ahead of us first, however. And one of those things is how your co-workers have requested you join present mic in the sound booth." Ever since Hisashi had died, Izuku had been kind of wandering. He wasn't happy, but he wasn't truly moping. He was existing on the earth with no purpose. His father, his dream of being a hero, was gone. Inko was never good at comforting him and couldn't connect with him very well, but after he died they had a sort of understanding. They were both affected by the death, and Izuku would come out of his room after doing his homework to help with dinner or dishes, or in the mornings we would prepare coffee or tea before he left. He had once left Post-its everywhere for a month to help her while she tried to stick to a diet with lots of exercise. Even now, she was finding notes everywhere, even when he was busy with school. So even though they weren't as close as everyone thinks, they are connected on a level few families are. She had been feeling so guilty about how much he was helping her that she took a day off and had searched for her late husband's old stuff from when he was a teenager. There was one box and she hauled it to the living room for them to look through after he got back. Since Hisashi had helped him with the bullying when he got back, he quickly changed and they opened the old box. As they looked through it more and more, broken wooden swords, various recipes and pages from old books, Izuku, her baby she wished she could know, seemed to brighten more and more. Old clothes from far before the era were dusted off, and finally at the bottom were old stationery telling a story of two people inevitably meeting. It was written by another person, but the letters were so detailed they could infer what Hisashi had said. Hisashi was the first one to reach out to the Urokodaki Sakanji of the Sajiri Mountain. TBH, not sure that's where he lives, but that's where he trains students. And they soon had been writing about breathing, something Inko herself didn't understand, but Izuku seemed to understand it perfectly. Soon after, he would check out breathing. the art of the demon slayers, and delve into the era it was apparently from. When he asked to visit the mysterious man, she was less than enthusiastic about it, but he soon convinced her. Then he called her saying he wanted to stay with the man. Then he was gone. But he came back. They somehow got an acceptance letter from UA, and he was standing in the middle of the sports arena, waiting to hear what the first round was going to be. And he will leave again during the break after the final exams, and he might not even come back. Though the kinda creepy twins did try to comfort her by saying he wouldn't have to do much, just kill the rest of the demons on another faraway mountain, she couldn't help but worry. For the past 2 weeks he had brought his friend Todoroki to the apartment, and they would mostly read and finish homework and then break out the board games and play them with her. She was happy to hear that they had met during Izuku's trip up north and was initially surprised Todoroki was the son of Endeavor, but considering what she had overheard Izuku tell Hisashi about All Might, she wasn't surprised more heroes were actually pretty sucky. She had been in the master bedroom when Izuku had started crying when Hisashi had asked him about his day. He had recalled a terrible day with All Might telling him he couldn't be a hero. She was shocked, but secretly happy he took down his All Might merch and gave most of it away. It also marked the same day Hisashi convinced her to sue Aldra. He was standing by Todoroki, the two of them watching everyone else, and you could barely tell with how much the cameras were switching, but he was looking at all the people in the stadium. He was so grown up. Then the first task is an obstacle race. Everyone participating, please go to the large set of doors behind you and we can get this party started. Midnight was the referee. Izuku would always analyze the referees and tasks with Hisashi. The race soon started. Todoroki froze the ground, getting a head start, but no one really stood still. Katsuki blasted forwards and a girl with a dark ponytail leapt forwards. Whoa, Eraser, what did you teach your students? Present Mike was the announcer along with Eraserhead, a buddy from when I attended, who appeared to be quite injured. Giant robots appeared, scaring Inko. Her baby would have to go past them, which soon collapsed somehow. She caught a glimpse of Izuku racing across them. Then there was a huge ravine with wires connecting islands of rock, and once again she spotted Izuku running across them like nothing. Finally there was a minefield of some sort. Pink explosions appeared whenever someone stepped in a spot, but Todoroki slid across them with his ice, and Katsuki blasted above them. Nothing could have prepared her for what Izuku was doing. He had started to walk carefully across them, until he found a pattern and started running across them, even flipping once when he accidentally activated one. At the end, he somehow made it to 4th place, Katsuki stealing first and Todoroki barely behind the explosive boy. Midoriya Hisashi, you asked for the full and honest history of the Demon Slayer's demise, and I shall tell you as much as I can in one letter. Kamado Tanjiro was unique among the Slayers. He used primarily water breathing but could also use what I suspect to be sun breathing, one of the first styles to be made. I personally taught him water breathing. He was also special because of his sister, Kamado Nezuko, who was a demon who managed to become human again. She didn't eat humans and would often assist her older brother. Their family had been killed by Kibutsuji Musen himself after he found that they were connected to sun breathing. Nezuko only survived due to her ability to absorb his blood somehow. Not included, several more descriptions of more people, including but not limited to Kibutsuji Musen, Tamayo and Yashiro, Hashibara Inosuke, Agatsuma Zenitsu, and Tomioka-ju. One day, Abayashiki Kagaya, 97th leader of the Demon Slayer Corps, decided to launch a large-scale attack on Kibutsuji Musen in his Infinity Castle. Tanjiro, Nezuko, their 2 friends and many of the pillars were killed in the effort to decapitate his head. They inevitably defeated him, and their only purpose was defeat to untransform the rest of the demons afterwards. Age has caught up to many of the surviving Slayers, myself and a few others being the only ones to pass the test of time. We haven't aged since that day, and I hope that one day we will be given the opportunity to pass on. Urokadaki Sakanji. Sitting in the announcer's booth with Yamato was really exhausting, especially since he wasn't really doing anything. The 2 friends of near countless years always found ways to exhaust each other, however Shoyuta wasn't doing that great. Problem child number 2 was in first, Todoroki in second, Monoma, who had copied Hakigear's Quirk and had been using what appears to be Ida's engines, got third, and problem child number 1 got fourth. The next test was sure to shake it up a bit. However, it had been an ongoing debate since school started. Really, before that, Nemuri had been practically begging for team laser tag for the last few years. Nedzu had actually wanted the test to be an epic team obstacle race, like the first round, but actually in the arena, and would include activities that involve more supervision like rock climbing and a huge rope swing. To further watch any student's cough, problem child number 1 cough that might have any sort of analytical skills. Aizawa had actually agreed with the principal before he saw that the teachers themselves would be a stage in the course. So the cavalry battle, which last took place when Aizawa himself was a third year due to how many people got hurt and killed, it wasn't a good idea for a student with a fairly weak quirk and no hand-to-hand experience participate against a very dangerous soul-manipulating quirk during the activity. To be honest, Shoyuta regrets not siding with Nemuri. He was worried about the 9 not hero students since they didn't take classes for fighting, nonetheless 1B who didn't have any actual fighting experience against other people. Now to Mai-eyed Knight for the next round. Yamada used his quirk to get Midnight's attention, who had been talking to Cementos while he poured the stage. There had been an issue getting the cement down earlier. Of course. Nemuri slid into her slightly lewd persona smoothly. Oh ho ho, let's see what's next. She snapped her whip, causing a huge screen behind her to turn on, randomly choosing the task. Oh, a cavalry battle. The rules are simple, kids. You did this in school, right? There's 1 rider and 3 to 4 horses. The main goal, however, isn't to get the hat the rider has Nananono. Instead, you have all been assigned point values based off of your earlier results. Group up, kiddos, it's gonna be a luong round. The crowd owed after the values were revealed, and immediately the Baku squad surrounded problem child number 2, who immediately yelled at everybody else outside of his group to leave him alone and soon allowed or asked Tsuyu, Kirishima and Siro on his team. Todoroki and problem child number 1 had partnered up almost quicker than them and asked one of the general education students, Shinso, who was in Yamada's class, along with one of the support class students, Hatsum, to join them. Uraraka, the brown-haired girl in his class that had taken a liking to problem child number 1, had also asked, but was turned down. Shoyuta couldn't tell why. The announcer's booth was too far away. The rest of the teams took a bit of time to make. Most of the students were sticking with students of their own class whose quirks they knew, except for the few other kids who were not in the hero course who had stuck with quieter students in 1B. Soon, however, the planning PRD was over. The 15 minutes they had for preparation to make their teams and plan for anything that might happen was up. Everybody had gotten their point values by now, Bakuga's team ahead by about 10 million points as the rest of the members of his team hadn't gotten very high values, barely slipping by the threshold. Because Todoroki and the problem child partnered up, they had very high values and were very easily in second place. However, nobody had really noticed them as they didn't have the 10 million points and problem child number 1 hadn't really shown any special abilities or his quirk yet. Shoyuta was interested to see what he would be doing as he had no gear and he wasn't even the rider. Instead, Shinso was the rider, something that they had figured out once they realized that it didn't really matter if the person with the highest value was the rider or not. When Bakugo had seen the members on Todoroki's team, he had given Shoyuta flashbacks to the USJ, some sort of primal hatred seen very easily in his eyes. Using the earpieces that had been supplied to them, they could hear Nemuri remark about how scary he was and the near unadulterated killing intent slipping through the cracks of his eyes. When the cavalry battle itself started, almost all of the teams went immediately after problem child number 2 who, after a few minutes of being annoyed with the sheer amount of people coming after him, had blasted off of the horses, his other teammates, and had started flying after them and stealing their headbands from above. There was a single team coming after Todoroki and problem child number 1's team, which was a team consisting of Tokoyami, Uraraka, Ida and Yaoyorozu. However, despite what possibly Nedzu or Shoyuta himself had been thinking, the problem child simply left his team, Hatsum taking the foot he had been supporting, and chased them down. At some point Yaoyorozu had created smoke bombs and had launched them, obscuring everybody's view from what was happening. The smoke had soon cleared after problem child number 2 had blasted to the cloud and it revealed problem child number 1 quickly ran back to his team and Yaoyorozu's team was completely knocked down. Ida was struggling against rope that presumably Yaoyorozu had made to trap Problem Child. Note to self, Problem Child number 1 cannot be trapped. Another interesting thing happened during the cavalry battle. While Todoroki had been supporting the left of Shinso, while Hatsum had been supporting the whole right side of Shinso, a team that had been previously chasing down Problem Child number 2's headbands had instead turned towards them and were chasing them down from the left. Todoroki had appeared to panic and accidentally let loose a small but definitely very noticeable wave of flames towards them. After doing so, and seeing that the team wasn't too injured, Todoroki had allowed his calm face to contort into one of a temporary rage, seemingly angry at himself. When Problem Child number 1 returned, he got a firm glare from the boy, had visually gulped, but continued. Nothing else interesting had seemed to happen. The dramatics had all run out in the beginning. Hauda was disappointed that no one had thought to take Team Yaoyorozu's points though. 10,570 points Team Bakugo, Bakugo Katsuki, Shiro Hanta, Kirishima Ejiro, Tsuyu Ajui. 890 points Team Shinso, Shinso Hitoshi, Todoroki Shoto, Midoriya Izuku, Hatsune. 765 points Team Monoma, Monoma Nito, Tetsutetsu, Shizuki Ibara, Komori Kinoko. 520 points Team Yaoyorozu, Yaoyorozu Momo, Ida Tenya, Uraraka Achoko, Tokoyami Fumikage. Chapter text. One day when I had come down to a small town, a green-haired boy had just hung up the public payphone and had spotted me following Endeavor like I was told to. The small town had a large crime issue and was suspected of housing some big-time villain. I guess I wasn't into what he was doing or paying attention as the boy had slipped into step with me, a few feet away. Endeavor hadn't noticed him, the odd green-haired boy that started walking with us. Endeavor was talking on the phone, not loud enough for everyone to hear, but loud enough that you could tell the gist of the conversation if you really listened to it. I'd never seen him before, but even in the small northern town you could tell he didn't really belong there. It was almost lunchtime, but Endeavor wasn't planning on letting us stop until he found the guy. He was planning on letting us starve until we found a crime lord. I hadn't had much of a breakfast as I wasn't supposed to eat in the car or on the plane. Soon the conversation ended and the pro-hero, I figured out that a pro-hero is different than a hero, hung up. He turned to check I was still following him and spotted the boy. Shoto, who is that? He turned back around again. I don't know, father. The boy furrowed his brows at the interaction and stepped a bit closer to me. Endeavor waved the boy away, not bothering to look at him. Go away, we're busy. Actually, only you are Endeavor-san. The boy replied, noticing the gap between me and the man, slid between them. I don't think your son is old enough for a hero license yet, so he cannot help you. This seemed to trigger my father. Shut up, boy, he can follow me. But he can't? Excuse me for my rudeness, Endeavor-san, but pro-heroes aren't allowed to let a civilian follow them, it puts them in physical danger. Now the looming man seemed to have a loss of words, as the smaller boy was legally correct. What's your name, boy? The curly-haired boy fell silent before replying. Endeavor-san, may I have lunch with your son before I return to the mountain? I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything when Endeavor told me to stay put and dragged the boy by the collar of his coat. I didn't say anything when the boy came back running to me with a burn on his side, and I certainly didn't say anything when he dragged me to a small noodle shop. Lunch was a quiet affair. The boy sat across from me, offering to be a silent pair of ears. I said nothing. He wouldn't believe me. After lunch, Endeavor had a car pick me up to take me to the small airport. But unfortunately for him, the boy had listened to my silence and said one thing before standing up and leaving. I have no special skills. I'm not skilled yet. I just tried to save you. I promise one day I will, but until then, please try to save someone else. After that, after he had thought about it, he decided to save his mother. He hadn't seen her for years. He had tried to before, gotten his shoes on even, but he never made it outside. But for now, while he had a shell of safety, he would gather proof and learn about her as much as he could. Now that boy is standing in front of him in an empty hallway, still a silent pair of ears. Midoriya, will you try to believe me? He tilted his head. Shoto-kun, I don't need to try. I promise I'll believe you. 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 He found himself hugging a slightly smaller yet firmer body. They weren't really hugging though, he was covering the person who was pressed sitting against the wall. I thank you. Please thank you dash. Shoto-kun, you're my friend, don't thank me. Todoroki could feel tears slipping by his cheeks, slipping past his chin, dropping onto the gym shirt of the boy below him. Taking a deep breath, he pushed away from Midoriya. Have you ever heard of a Quirk marriage? The boy's eyes widened before he nodded. It's like a political marriage, right? It benefits one person directly. Shoto-kun, they're illegal. Even if the family consents to it. He nodded, allowing the boy time to say something, anything to make it easier. Shoto-kun, are you the product of one? I don't mean to be insensitive but dash. Yes, Midoriya, my father married my mother without her consent. Or her full consent at least. Shoto-kun, I would like to hear the story at some point, but you don't have to tell me everything now. I would just like to know what to be careful of. Tell me more about yourself. And please, I call you by your first name, call me Izuku. Izuku has caught Shoto off guard more times than once in that statement alone. He believes in Shoto, something no one has ever done before. He is actually careful with Shoto, he wants to know more about his friend, and wants to be called Izuku. So Izuku is told everything. The first 1v1 fight that takes place is Izuku against Shinso, a boy who Izuku had asked to be a part of the cavalry battle team for the sole reason that reminded Izuku about some stories about butterflies. Something about the purple. It had taken almost all of the planning PRD, but they had coaxed him enough out of his shell to learn his quirk and abilities, mostly due to the support course Hatsum's incessant begging. Shoto had seen Izuku somehow conjure up a huge wave at the USJ. He had been running down the landslide zone when he felt an odd prickle and saw it. However, every time he asked about his quirk, Izuku would turn the conversation away from it. A mysterious water quirk versus a brainwash quirk. Standing at opposite sides of the arena, they seemed to stay rock still until the whistle blew. They both ran at each other. Izuku stayed low to the ground while Shinso simply ran straight at him. At the last moment, just before Shinso could land a punch, Izuku flipped over the taller boy, simultaneously turning to grab his forehead and slam him backwards onto the ground. Izuku spun around to sit on his stomach, staring the boy down. Almost impossible to catch at the distance, Shinso squinted his eyes before sitting up and moving his legs back to pin Izuku back down on the ground. Izuku instead rolled over, quickly standing up, letting the other stand. Shoto could see Shinsu's mouth moving almost the whole time, trying to get a rise out of the shorter boy. Shoto was handed a pair of binoculars by a UA staff member and could now see Izuku's face contorting slightly. Depending on what was being said, he was either covered in grief or was barely hiding simmering anger. Eventually, Izuku ran at Shinso, catching everyone off guard and pushing him out of bounds. Reaching a hand out, Izuku said something as Midnight declared him the winner, this time surprise finding a rental space on Shinsu's not very expressive face. After my fight with Shinso, Shoto-kun had pulled me away from the seats, to the same hallway he'd previously spilled his life story to me. There was one difference, and that was that he was standing where I had been and I was where he was. I waited for him to start, luckily not having to wait long. At the USJ, you were with Tsuyu, right? I nodded, letting him continue. I need you to explain what happened, what you did, because I had felt a chill and then you had somehow generated a huge not quite wave, but you haven't shown that before while everyone else knows at least the basics of everyone else's. No one knows what your quirk is. Sorry for ranting. I allowed myself a few deep breaths to calm myself while internally I was kind of freaking out. What should I say? Oh, I'm quirkless, but I know this ancient fighting technique that I use. I'm actually really surprised Bakugo hasn't told everyone. Oh Kami, what if he's not telling anyone so he can look smug when they inevitably get angry and mean at me? What if... Izuku, you're mumbling? Oh, bad habits die hard, I guess. His comment does push me back into the past, almost. I remember everything Urokodaki had done to train me like the back of my hand, and how he would throw small pebbles at me whenever I would mumble to keep my thoughts in my head. Alright, sorry. Shoto-kun, what are your thoughts on quirkless people? I just want to know. He looked briefly surprised before answering. I've never met one thanks to him. I'm not really sure. I wasn't surprised by this, I had been thinking about Endeavor during the fight before Shinso had been asking me about touchy subjects. Like my quirk and alleged hero costume. Apparently the general education thinks I have a super traditional costume, which somehow translates to a cowboy-esque look. Alright, sorry. Shoto-kun, you have asked me to believe you, so I have to ask the same thing of you. He nodded, silently allowing me to continue. I'm quirkless. The pinky toe joint isn't solid evidence I don't have one, but it's never manifested. Even so, I don't have the quirk factor to have one. I physically am like a person from like 2030 or something. I have tonsils and an appendix and everything. I ranted again, sorry. He had seemed to almost space out while I was talking, at least until I apologized. Grabbing my shoulders tight, I could feel the faint temperature differences in his hands. Izuku, please don't apologize for ranting. But how? I'm just really confused. We could hear Present Mike announcing that the next round would start in a few minutes since one of the students was having stomach issues. Shoto-kun, you can't tell anyone what I'm about to tell you. I need you to promise me this. I promise. Unless you're hurting yourself or something. I paused before continuing. I can agree to that. I use a technique called breathing, specifically water breathing mostly. I kind of know how to use an almost flame breathing too, but I can't really get it to work. I learned it when I was on the mountain. When we first met. Yeah. There's these different kinds of breathing styles, and they're like specific breathing patterns that increase the lung capacity of someone, increasing the amount of oxygen in the blood, which make you stronger and tend to help you stay in the moment. Breathing styles all originate from these 5 fundamental breathing styles based on elements, or at least that's how it was explained to me. Water, flame, wind, stone, and thunder. From there, really strong swordsmen were able to put their own spins on the styles, developing their own unique techniques. Out of the 9 last Hashira, or golden pillars since they were like the last ones, only 4 actually followed one of the fundamental breathing styles, funnily enough. Supposedly, or at least Tanjiro said so, I could concentrate my breathing so much that I can will my own torn blood vessels into closing through breathing, effectively staunching the bleeding if I were to get hurt. So you like mentally control oxygen to get strong. All without a quirk. Izuku, that sounds like a quirk. It originates from a time before quirks, even before the modern age. It's impossible for me to have a quirk, Shoto-kun, so don't entertain the idea. I'm okay with not having a quirk. Their conversation was broken with Todoroki being called to the arena. When Izuku returned to the seats, the only person to have appeared to have noticed was Bakugo, but he fortunately stayed quiet, despite Izuku being able to feel the hatred and anger. Shoto-kun and Shiro walked onto the concrete, Shiro appearing to have new pants on. Immediately after the whistle was blown, however, Izuku figured out his bicolored friend was actually frustrated. Clearly Izuku should start texting him a bit more about breathing. A huge glacier was formed, completely encasing Shiro. When the contestants did return to the stands, almost everyone swarmed Shiro, telling him he did the best he could have done. Izuku simply walked to his friend and led him to seats slightly further away from everyone else. When the winner sat down, however, he was surprised by being glomped on by the shorter boy. It took 7 minutes, even with Endeavor's help, to melt the ice as Shoto-kun was told he didn't need to help. Sitting in the announcer's booth with Hizashi wasn't terrible per se, but it was definitely hard. Hizashi always has been and always will be a booming extrovert, and no matter what has and will always try to include me in whatever he does. When Nedzu first mentioned he had requested I buddy with him in the booth due to his fear of being alone, I downright said no. I don't know how I ended up here. After problem child number 1 showed off his skill, Todoroki had nearly encased Shiro in a small glacier. It had taken far too long to melt it, an honest hassle for cleanup. Tetsu was fighting Kirishima next, and Hizashi had been in awe of how similar of quirks they had. Though they also seemed to have the same level of training, sans Tetsu's 2 years of karate when he was 8, it seemed like Kirishima would, if only due to being excited to fight the other. Tetsu was looking almost as excited, However, much more pensive due to the idea of having to fight a kid from 1A, who survived being attacked by FING villains, something I'm surprised isn't scaring the other students from directly attacking them, but I suppose that's how heroes should act in this situation. When the fight actually started, they had almost the same moves: a punch at the jaw, an attempt of a kick to the shin, elbowing the other's gut when they somehow found their way close enough. Eventually, the gods of jelly packets must have heard my prayers when they both exhausted themselves after 5 or 6 minutes. I sighed, Hisashi screaming about how incredible it was. Later, after the first round was finished, they will do a thumb wrestle, and holy shit, if it's not the most viewed thumb wrestle in the world, I'm going to eat my goddamn shirt. Kirishima wins eventually, moving on to the next round. Tokoyami vs Komori Kinoko was next, the girl's ability to release fast-growing mushroom spores giving her an advantage, particularly when you pair it with her almost sadistic personality when planning, or as Vlad King complained. However, the battle itself was very different. She had seemed incredibly shy during the sports festival thus far, but when she walked up the stairs to the raised stage, she seemed to grow out of it. Whoa shoulda, that's one scary grin, Hisashi's words, not his, smirk finding a permanent home on her face. Tokoyami, on the other hand, looked visibly disturbed by it. When the match officially started, the smirk only grew as she released spores and saw the mushrooms growing. Tokoyami took a few steps back before running towards her, covering his mouth, beak thing. She also rushed towards him, increasing the density of the spores, until Tokoyami stopped just shy of her apparent range and released Dark Shadow, who quickly grabbed her and made a move to place her down behind the line. For her credit, she did struggle, releasing spores onto the shadow, though only a few seemed to stick to him and start growing. The match was over once she was carefully put down over the line. Yaoyorozu vs Hatsume was next, and there really wasn't that much to say about the match aside from the fact that it was an odd combination of an ad and a play fight, something Hisashi was disappointed in. At first it had started normally, or at least as normally as the Hatsume kid could be. While the support corps student stumbled through close combat, slowly backing towards the white line, Yaoyorozu had gotten some sort of gas sprayed in her face, and somehow the Hatsume hacked into the speakers and began ranting about the gas and all the other babies they had. Yaoyorozu had been able to overcome the effects of the nausea-inducing gas and gotten a solid punch in. The form was pretty good but still leaked the finesse of practice, causing Hatsume to fall backwards, where she then scooted over to the other side of the line. Yaoyorozu soon collapsed and the support course student rushed over, helping her to the medical stretcher. I suspect this action will resonate with Yaoyorozu, and I will bet my scarf on it. For the next fight, Vlad King of all people came to sit in the announcer's booth, something that bothered me endlessly. While Hisashi and Namuri could play nice with the man, even being in a book club with him, I have no such skill. As such, I devoted myself to watching the next match as close as I could. Minoma vs Ida. The class president was sure to lose if the 1B student copied the quirks of his classmates. The 1B student obviously didn't. When the match started, Ida immediately ran to the other, running over to push him out of bounds. This didn't work as expected, obviously. Minoma copied his quirk, not realizing it was a mutant quirk, and immediately underestimated the amount of control Ida had over his quirk. He used the engines, fell flat on his face, and then Ida scooped him up and put him out of bounds. Azui Tiu, the student who he had been trusted with by problem child number 1 during the USJ trip, something I found out when she had visited me in the hospital, something I respect her for, versus Shizuki Ibara of 1B was the last match before problem child number 2's turn was up. Right off the bat, the 1B student had asked that no bad feelings arise from the match. The match had started curiously, small groups of vines reaching for Azui, who would use her powerful legs to jump away from them. Meanwhile, before unleashing a large wave of vines, Shizuki appeared to take a prayer position. Azui was overwhelmed with dodging them and was soon wrapped in them, unable to escape despite her strength. Going to UA as someone who always felt underrepresented, being literally invisible, felt surreal. The other girls were so nice and invited me for study sessions during the past 2 weeks while we prepared for the sports festival, and even Tsu's little brothers wanted to play with me. Of course, all good things come to an end. Like coming to my senses that UA is for people who want to be heroes, and to be a hero you are throwing yourself at danger, and that danger is scary. I feel incredibly bad for Uraraka. She's been nervous about having to fight Bakugo during all of the previous battles. Bakugo, in my opinion, is a little beach. He whines like he's never done hard work in his life and was given everything on a silver platter. Beach, I'm invisible. Beat that. But really he's so spoiled it makes me sick. He has no idea how hard everything is and acts like he's better than everyone else. My parents work for the Hero Commission, working backstage to make sure there's no bad blood between heroes, to make sure it doesn't cause issues for civilians. I of all people know how much shit this will get him in, and he won't correct it. My parents were almost glowing with happiness when I told them that I made it in. He acts like he skipped the whole entrance exam arc and got in by recommendation. Momo must have somehow noticed my anger, likely by me subconsciously reflecting reds and oranges, a byproduct of my quirk, so she patted my shoulder before leaning in closer to point to the stage. Uraraka was standing opposite Bakugo, watching for midnight to start the battle. I couldn't wish her good luck before she left. When the whip let out a large snap, Uraraka ran backwards, turning ever so slightly so she didn't cross the line while Bakugo blasted towards her. Using the hand-to-hand that Jiro had managed to help us figure out, she managed to block many of his punches and explosions, constantly running backwards, just out of his reach. Eventually, by the time she was visibly panting and they were back in the middle, he stopped, yelling at her. She wiped her forehead before looking him dead in the eyes with the most determination I've ever seen anyone give off, before ducking low and rushing him. He tried exploding her, but she would always veer away from him, only to rush back. He honestly wasn't moving much, mostly turning in circles, but eventually rocks and dust were blocking the view of them. There were a few more moments of explosions before they stopped and the dust cleared a bit. Bakugo was standing in the middle of rubble, Uraraka just outside of it, hands on her knees, watching him. Oh yeah, I'm super good at navigating dust and wrecks. My parents work in construction, so when I have to deliver them lunch, I have to get good at it. Wow, that's so cool. It's like you were a hero before you started UA. Delivering lunch to hungry people in unstable environments. Huh, I've never thought of it like that, Toru. I feel so strong, thanks a bunch. I'm on top of the world. Calm down, Uraraka, we're supposed to be studying. Oh yeah, we don't want Momo to catch us. Shoo. Bakugo took a step forwards and she was running towards him again, but slightly to the side, and then there was an explosion and they were hidden from view again. A shirt was thrown out of the dust and Bakugo suddenly burst out, looking particularly murderous. Suddenly the dust seemed to lift above his head, and Uraraka was standing, barely, surrounded by floating rubble, the dust having a slight pink tint to it. He rushed towards her. The rocks dropped. A single explosion more. The dust settled. The fight was over. Uraraka's body was draped over a large rock, Bakugo standing above her. He was screaming, something, finish the fight. He dropped like a rock, the victor just as unconscious as the loser. When she came back, a few minutes before the next match was to start, she had more than a few bandages and a head wrap, but she was just as cheery as she ever has been. The other girls were clamoring around her, asking her question after question before I could wrap her in a hug. When we settled, Sue was sitting next to her, everyone else sitting in seats surrounding them. I got the idea from Midoriya, avoid him. Like he did in the battle trials. He just totally circumvented him and won, so I thought I would give it a try too. I guess that didn't work though. It was still kind of fun though. You are so lucky you didn't actually die at the end, Uraraka. Huh, I had just exhausted myself, kinda anticlimactic, but my parents had called and said it was the best outcome, so it counts for something. Momo spoke up after the brief silence Uraraka had unknowingly caused. But you made us worried. But Mom, you're always worried about us. I think both myself and Imuri have worried about Shoyuta since year 2. Ever since Oboro was killed, he has never gone back to himself. Yes, he acts similar, but it's like a puppet trying to copy him. He used to go with whatever idea we had and usually help us, but now it's like he actively avoids getting roped up in our shenanigans. Even just sitting in the announcer's booth, Not even having to say anything really seemed to push his buttons. When he actually accepted without complaining was something that honestly surprised us. It was like he was almost coming back to himself. So when Todoroki Shoto and Midoriya Izuku's fight was about to start, of course we didn't expect him to actually sit up in his seat and watch the sports festival like we used to. Ken was still sitting with us since he decided he liked the view more, and Namuri had joined us too, seeing that she was just about frozen from Todoroki's last fight. Ken had gone to check on the kids and had come back with the news that Bakugo Katsuki had apparently been yelling at Uraraka Ochako because her tactic had been inspired by a plan Midoriya had on the first week of school. I side-eyed Shoyuta, silently telling him that he would eventually have to deal with the two of them. He sighed. DMN problem children. Shoyuta, something is going to happen, and I would rather not have to announce that a fight caused two of the highest-scoring Hero Corps students to be injured because of some issues. I argued. They went to the same school for a while, there shouldn't be FING issues. Tell Nedzu I need to talk to him later. I sighed, shaking my head. I guess, just please take care of it. Ken must have been listening to the conversation when he added, "Oh, are you talking about the kids?" "No sheet, you need to take care of them, Aizawa." F off, I don't need to do sheet. He retorted. Seriously Shoyuta, you're their homeroom teacher, you need to help them sort it out. You could just drop them off at Hound Dog if you really don't want to deal with them, but at least get them that far. I compromised, turning to the stage. Look, they're about to start. Namuri, you still have to announce the start. Actually, shouldn't you be down there to make sure they don't go too far? I'm not going to get frozen again. Cementos has pellets with my gas that he can just break. Though you have a point. Are you ready, boys? Getting a nod from each of the quiet students, she continued. Don't forget the rules. Start on go. 3, 2, 1, go. God damn it, Namuri, you're so lazy. I began my narration for the audience. The boys started running towards each other, Todoroki using his ice to leap into the air when he got close enough, jumping off towards Midoriya. Midoriya bent his legs for a single moment before sliding below the split boy. He quickly turned on his heel, running towards the boy who was still turned around. Thanks to the benefit of being in the announcer's booth, we could hear everything from the gasp Todoroki made when a foot landed in the middle of his back to the sigh Midoriya made when Todoroki let himself fall forwards. Midoriya slightly jumped away from the fallen boy, letting him get up. Once he was up, they ran at each other again, but this time Midoriya took to the air, jumping high into the air, more than just outside of Todoroki's reach. What the hell, Shoyuta, isn't he quirkless? Ken exclaimed, while I was happy the mic seemed to not pick up on it. Problem child number 1 is quirkless, didn't give his all at the tests and is still better than almost all the students. It's complicated and a headache to try to explain. Prompt Midoriya landing barely a foot behind Todoroki and grabbing the boy's right arm, flipping him over his shoulder and slamming him on the ground. Shoto-kun, why aren't you using your quirk? Ken leaned forwards, leading Aizawa to lean closer to the speakers. His eyes widened for a moment before narrowing. You don't have a quirk, it wouldn't be fair. Todoroki leaned upwards and brought Midoriya down, nearly covering the slightly smaller boy in a tight grasp, holding him still, unable to escape. Midoriya kicked his legs, hitting Todoroki's lower back and quickly shimmying out from under Todoroki. You used your quirk to get above me and even then I managed to slam you down? Excuse me, but that sounds like an excuse to me. You would get hurt and I'm not using fire either way. Todoroki attacked the boy, punching his shoulder before the other could block it. Almost a full minute of hand-to-hand combat with a skill no one had seen them use before. Namuri was openly gaping at them, and I had given up on trying to narrate what was going on for the audience, something that had been difficult to do even before now. During this time Shoyuta broke the silence. If Todoroki were to use his fire now the air would heat up and cause all sorts of wind, the gas pellets wouldn't work. Huh, how do you know? Namuri seemed offended that her own support items wouldn't work. He pointed to the thermometer showing the temperature on the stage. He's been using his quirk, probably subconsciously, the whole time. He's been cooling the air. The thermometer showed that it was roughly the temperature of an ice rink, not exactly freezing, but cold enough that the ice from earlier hadn't started melting yet. The people in the first few rows likely could feel it. Midoriya jumped back after blocking a kick. But I said it before, I could theoretically staunch any bleeding, besides my training tested me enough that I know when I need to stop. Trust me and let me do this at the very least, Shoto-kun. They then fell silent and still, watching each other. I can't use his fire. The statement felt like the equivalent of a PRD. Never in my hero career had I been so lost. What are they talking about? What do they know that we don't know? Is it Endeavor's fire Todoroki is talking about? Why is he talking like it's a bad thing? What don't we know? But Midoriya was adamant to not let their conversation end. But you aren't using your mother's ice? Besides, your quirk is totally unique, it's your quirk, right? Unless someone has the ability to transfer quirks, it's your fire and your ice. For some reason the last sentence seemed to send a chill down my spine. The idea that every quirk is different, the idea that everyone had to have a different quirk meant that there was to be someone, somewhere that can, indeed, transfer quirks. They could control what kind of life a person could live, they could be anywhere and yet, might not even exist. But the idea that logically they should actually exist scares me. Todoroki seemed to still and his eyes quickly narrowed. Despite having just been sparring as fast and hard as he could for the past few minutes, his exhaustion seemed to have been lifted. Thank you. I apologize for everything. And then the stage below me seemed to light up in a brilliant display of light and heat and fire and so much wind. Shoyuta had been right, the sudden expansion of the air caused everything to blow back. It rattled the windows and the audience were tightly grasping onto their chairs, desperate to see the fight. Todoroki's whole left side was burning, and then a single pose later, huge flames were rushing forwards, towards Midoriya, who was crouching low for a jump. Midoriya jumped high, almost avoiding the flames, but getting caught by the tail end of the huge blast, causing his uniform to be a bit more than singed. Todoroki looked to be wavering slightly, nearly unable to move. Midoriya dropped to one leg, grabbing a burnt pebble. They both shared a small smile that seemed to hold so much more than could be described. There was so much understanding, so much conversation, no person other than the two could read it. And in that moment, the moment before a blade slides next to a spine, before a rock is thrown, before one can fall unconscious, Izuku has saved a friend from drowning. He released the small pebble in his hand, closing his eyes, not knowing if it would land or if the sudden warmth he felt was from him or his friend, and soon opened them to see the other collapsed on the ground, before collapsing himself. Throughout the past 2 weeks I have done a terrible job of preparing for the sports festival. Playing board games with Mom and Shoto-kun had been fun, but the only other thing I had done was find a deserted warehouse and try combining breathing forms with my father's old sword, which didn't even work that well for me, or so Urokadaki said. I don't know otherwise as I don't have a sword of my own. I had spent 2 weeks eating, sleeping and swinging a sword around, more or less. I did do some workouts, but due to being restrained to a warehouse I couldn't do much more than that. Aside from giving some homeless people money and reporting 16 drag deals to some degree, spanning from calling the police because something suspicious was happening to knocking them out because they actually went into the building, there wasn't very much excitement. The gyms wouldn't let me train at them due to my quirklessness, and I didn't want to practice my breathing at UA. I had also been told to wait to take my quirk apprehension test because Aizawa-sensei was still healing and I was supposed to be preparing anyway. And then when I was fighting Shoto-kun did I realize what an opportunity one had let slip from my hands. I wasn't prepared to fight against such a strong opponent. His quirk was difficult for me to predict, likely due to the fact that I haven't done any quirk analysis since I came back, but that's a problem for later, and I had panicked, only coming up with the plan to force him to exhaustion via using his fire. Anyways, the sports festival. Kirishima versus Yaoyorozu. Kirishima won only because he had more muscle than her and could push her out of bounds. She also didn't have enough fat for her to use her quirk for anything more than a small shield. Tokoyami versus Ida. Ida won if only due to the brightness of the flames coming out of his engines. Tokoyami had a high chance of winning if he had used Dark Shadow to stay on the ground and not let Ida get a head start by running at him after Ida had clearly expected the other to rush him. An odd battle, filled with a large amount of, "Are you going to rush me now or what?" going on. Shiozaki versus Bakugo? Bakugo, easy win. Blasting away the vines, he blasted her hard enough in one hit she fell unconscious. Pity, she should have gone under him via the ground, but I suppose he hasn't changed that much to give her the time to. Myself versus Ida. In the end, I was surprised I won the round against him. I barely dodged many of his hits and I ended up with a large bruise on my chest from a kick he landed while I was off balance. He used his recipro burst to land the kick and then his engine stalled, allowing me ample time to put him in a sleeper hold, something I was surprised Nezuko wanted to teach me, but she's scary in her own right so I won't question it. Kirishima versus Bakugo. If I know anything, it's that credit is given where credit is due. Kirishima put quite the fight up against Bakugo, the fight getting to the point where even Bakugo was getting sloppy. They're both close-range fighters, so when one is getting sloppy the other tends to as well. Kirishima was the first to tire out though, despite having apparently been working the hardest at strengthening his quirk, taking Wednesdays and Saturdays as rest days while almost living at the gym every other day. Not the kind of regime I had. In the end Bakugo won after noticing he had pushed back Kirishima quite far and taking the dirty move of just lifting the tired boy up and blasting him the remaining length left. The final fight. From experience of binging the previous festivals with Dad, they are the best of the best, usually one from 1A and one from 1B, actually keeping that pattern for almost 7 years until now. Until I fight him at least. I could still feel the exhaustion from fighting Shoto-kun, and the faint bruise that couldn't heal completely from Ida had me sore. I don't want to fight Bakugo. A realization Urokodaki would likely disagree with me on. One day, my boy, you're going to realize how angry you are at him. He's stupid and you can't hold that kind of stuff forever. That wanting to fight back is a good thing, you haven't lost yourself yet, you haven't given in yet, but you need to make sure you're both safe. Possibly the kindest and most direct piece of advice I got from Urokodaki, the idea that this was a controlled environment was pushing me to not back down, not turn away the opportunity to show my mom that I didn't need her coddling, to tell Urokodaki that he was right, that I would carry his legacy and not lose myself. When did I walk out to the stage? I was now facing him, he was visibly shaking and I never felt calmer. I was like I woke from a good sleep, like the ones before Urokodaki got sick. I never felt more rejuvenated. I felt like I was on top of the world and then there were explosions and I flinched and I just knew I lost the fight. I blinked and I was landing on my back and Bakugo was leaning over me, pupils dilated. Where's that fire, Deku? Where the F it, nerd? Fight me, damn it. Wait, fire? What fire? There was no fire, right? Where the F it, you wet sock? Are you looking down on me again, you incompetent moron? I'm so confused, what is he talking about? I've never looked down on him, shouldn't I be panicking? I flinched earlier, what's happening? All of a sudden I saw black spots, soon feeling a slap on the side of my head. I had no choice but to accept them and then I was floating. There were 3 shadows when I opened my eyes next. I looked around, Urokodaki was gently rubbing my shoulder while Nezuko was rushing with water and Tanjiro was talking to Sabito. Makomo was sitting across from Urokodaki on the other side of me. I couldn't tell where we were, we looked to be in an abyss although there was a rough floor and enough chairs for everyone arranged in a circle. Hello again, my boy. Urokodaki was the first to notice I was awake, and I immediately wrapped my arms around him, giving the tightest hug I could muster with my bruised chest, giving him all the words I couldn't say. He just seemed to smile and return the hug before Tanjiro ran over, Sabito in tow to make it a group hug, wrapping his arms around me and the pink-haired boy patting my head. I felt the tears before even Nezuko could start to rush over. We were so worried about you. You've done so well. We're really proud of you, Otudo-san. Tenkiro pulled back so he could pull the girls closer. You are our Otudo now, there's no backing out of it now. Nezuko cheered, Makomo smiled. Yeah, well, you could have gotten out of it before Sabito got involved, but now we all like to watch you, so you really can't get out of it. Makomo, what do you mean you've been watching me? Where are we anyways? I asked, pulling back so we could all sit in a circle. Aren't I Dean now? I mean, you're all dead, right? We are, my boy, but you certainly aren't dead. Tanjiro has spent the most time thinking about it. Tanjiro smiled, patting my head. Something like this happened when I used sun breathing. It was like I could talk to my family again. My dad gave me advice. We were all pulled here when you blacked out, but I think we're in some sort of haven kind of? I've been able to meet other demon slayers that lived during our time, but I think it's because you've only met us that you can see us. What about the shadows? I looked to the 3 shadows on the walls that had been moving as if they were talking, their hands moving as if they were giving a pitch. We don't know yet. You do need to wake up now though, Orodo. Your fight hasn't been called off quite yet. Win for us, my boy. My eyes closed and suddenly I felt warmer, opening my eyes to see Bakugo still looming over me, screaming as if I didn't just black out. I took a breath and pushed. He was tossed to the side, sliding a few feet before blasting up and rushing towards me. Getting up, it was as if everything was slower. Total concentration. Control. By letting more oxygen into my system, my brain is working overtime and I'm picking up more signals. When did I know this? Dodging under a right hook, I gave him one of my own, soon hooking my leg around his knees and forcing him to fall, twisting around him to sit on his back while he faced the ground. Locking his legs together with one of my own and holding his hands against his own ears, I waited for him to forfeit, never once realizing how cruel I was being. The only thing I could think was, don't get hurt, don't hurt him. Don't get hurt, don't hurt him. Don't get hurt, don't hurt him. Midnight snapped her whip before Bakugo could reply, as he had slumped and fallen unconscious. Midoriya Izuku wins. For a slight moment I realized no one knew that a quirkless kid had won the festival, and then I barely leaned to the side before collapsing as well. The days following the sports festival were chaotic for the staff. Problem child number 1 had, according to Nemuri and Cementos, had blacked out momentarily during his and problem child number 2's fight, just for a short enough time that no one could really notice unless they were close enough. 4 placement problem child number 1 was given first place, though there was a constant debate about if it should be revealed that he blacked out. Though I spent most of the week off napping and preparing lesson plans so that next year they all make the second round, I did have to bribe Nemuri to take over the lesson where they choose their hero names. A headache. The first names weren't bad per se, but they were kinda cringy and I soon found myself glad I paid for a new pair of heels for Nemuri. Aoyama, shining hero, can't stop twinkling. Originally, I cannot stop twinkling. Ashido, acid rain hero, Pinky. Originally, acid hero, alien queen. Azui, rainy season hero, Froppy. Originally, Froppy, but the hero commission likes whatever beginning bits they now require, so rainy season hero was added. Ida, speedy hero, Tenya. A red flag, as Tensei is always talking about his brother inheriting his name. Maybe they'll talk about it when Ida visits him next. Eureka, gravity hero, Uravity. The first person to choose a good name right off the bat. Ojiro, martial arts hero, Tailman. Another person to choose a good name first try. Kaminari, stun gun hero, Chargebolt. Apparently the hardest person to come up with a hero name for. There were several ideas and eventually the class collaborated on it. Kirishima, sturdy hero, Red Riot. Crimson Riot reference, another first try. Koda, petting hero, Anima. Another class collaboration. Sato, sweets hero, Sugarman. Originally, Sugar Muscle. Shoji, tentacle hero, Tentacle. Nemuri had to change his original name since he didn't realize it was a pawn thing. Jiro, hearing hero, Earphone Jack. Originally, adapter hero, MP3. Zero, taping hero, Cellophane. Originally, Tapeman. Tokoyami, jet black hero, Tsukuyami. Originally, Tokoyami. Todoroki, split hero, Shoto. Nemuri decided that he put in enough effort and let it slide. Hagakure, stealth hero, Invisible Girl. Originally, Stealthy. Problem child number 2, Great Explosion Murder God, Dynamite. How was this accepted? Problem child number 1, Pillar hero, The Last. Conversation for Nedzu, honestly. Yayorozu, everything hero, Creati. Originally, I create. Shinsu's paperwork was being passed though, so he was a late addition and due to not officially being in the class, has not met them yet. Which was why I was texting Nedzu at 15:30 when I could be napping. Nedzu, Hello, Eraserhead. How are the hero names? Acceptable, good enough they won't ruin anyone's career. I assume you want to talk about Shinso? Yes, the paperwork was finished after the sports festival. When can he join the class? The paperwork should be done by Friday. No one here is efficient anymore. That's 4 days of classes he's missing. I frowned. He was supposed to join today. I understand he is being emailed the gist of each lesson at the end of each day he misses. Thank you. One more thing. Yes. He seemed to click well with Midoriya, who I'd like to talk to you about anyways. He did. What is this about? Midoriya's hero name, obviously. I think it's odd. Is it a problem? No, though I would like to explain it to you. You understand it? Yes, my dear friend was possibly the only reason he knows of it. The one who wrote to you about him? Yes, his name was Urokadaki Sakanji. He was a former swordsman. Does it have to do with the breathing thing? It does. Have you read about it? I was going to ask Midoriya about it when we did the Quirk assessment test, but that hasn't happened yet obviously. You know about the founding forms, but what about the people who used them? The Demon Slayer Corps? The legend? Exactly. Urokadaki was one of those people, supposedly. I think he was. He was walking on this earth longer than anyone else was. He could tell you about the 1980s like it happened yesterday. It didn't. But he lived through it, though in a house on a mountain no one else has touched for who knows how long. Impossible. But he did it. Explain his hero name then. Urokadaki said that in the Demon Slayer Corps there had been a tier system and the Hashira, the pillars, were the strongest and most powerful demon slayers. He named himself after them. He did. Why haven't we just talked to him about this yet? He should develop on his own for now. When I start teaching him, after the exams, we will talk all together. But don't understand why we haven't talked to him about this yet, but I suppose we don't want to distract him from his studies yet. Exactly. Do you know where he's going for his work study? I haven't looked yet. They chose them after their hero names with Nemuri, but that's all I know. A swordsmith hero in the far north of Japan. He uses a sword, it makes sense. Perhaps we should watch him more after he comes back. No sheet. I need to approve the work studies.